All right, it is now 6:10, and we are out of closed executive session, and we will reconvene the regular meeting of the Board of Education with the pledge to the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. One board member stepped out. We apologize. We're going to wait a minute. Okay. All right, roll call, please.
Mrs. Brenner.
Here.
Mr. Booker.
Here.
Mr. Herrera.
Here.
Mrs. Haupt.
Here.
Mrs. Mayville.
Here.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Here.
Mr. Zicker.
Here.
Before we start the regular meeting of the board, as a reminder, all board members are expected to follow our approved meeting norms and board protocols as follows. I, as a board president, will preside over the meeting, and we as a board will adhere to board policies, board processes, and board procedures. We will model the behaviors expected of students, staff, and community members. We have an obligation to express our opinions and respect others' opinions. We will remain business-oriented, objective, and ends-focused in our work. We will assume positive intent, and we will listen alertly to the discussion. Are there any items on the agenda any members of the board would like to amend or move? Hearing none, do I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda of the regular meeting of the Board of Education, June 17th, 2024, as presented?
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the agenda of the regular meeting of the Board of Education on June 17th, 2024, as presented. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mr. Zicker.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mrs. Haupt.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 7-0. At this time, we will have a public hearing regarding District 100's budget for 2023-24 to amend District 100's fiscal budget 2024. Mrs. Armstrong, is there anything you'd like to comment on regarding the amendment to District 100's fiscal year 2024 budget?
Simply that this amendment is to record the additional $4.4 million in grant funding that we have received as a district. Most of that is coming from federal or state grants, which would include the PFA grant that we received this year from the state for the first time, and increased funding for our title programs of over $2.5 million. So these are all good changes. I, wish we had got more realistic allocations from the very beginning, so this wouldn't have happened. But it is a nice problem to have that we were awarded additional grant dollars to pay for some of those title services and our early childhood.
At this time, anyone wishing to speak, please approach the podium and state your name for the records. All right, hearing none, the public hearing regarding amending District 100 fiscal year 2024 budget is closed. Next on the agenda, we have our district celebrations, and I'm pleased to share District 100 celebrations will begin again after taking a couple months off due to our public hearings regarding Perry Elementary School. And first up, we'd like to recognize several District 100 employees who retired. Are you going to read these, Dr. Shutt?
Whichever you prefer.
I'll have you go.
All right, I will read them. Under support staff, we have Sandra Cordray, Darlene Cameron, Nancy Blazer, Karen Green, Jackie Lombardi, Patricia Fuller, Carl Daler, Virginia Gamboa, Patricia Martin, Kathleen Huff, and Robert Seal, who are all retiring from the school district this year. Sandra leads with 30 years in the district, so some extraordinary service. Do we have any of those individuals here tonight?
Mr. Daly.
We have one.
Oh, yes, we are in the front row. So we are very, very glad to have had those many years of service. We did also recognize these individuals at a retirement dinner, which Dr. Ady and staff did a wonderful job of recognizing everyone. We also have certified staff. We'll start with Angela Bailing with 34 years. So just 34 years. Pamela Nelson, Michael Myers, Mary Marchanowski, Peter Becky, Shannon Wagner, Patricia Evans, Lisa Schitze, Mary Jo Miller, and Anna Abraham. We wish them all well in their next endeavors. Congratulations to our retirees.
All right, next we would also like to recognize our graduates of 2024. District 100 awarded 577 students their high school diplomas at graduation ceremonies on Saturday, May 18th, consisting of 268 students from Belvedere High School and 309 students from Belvedere North High School, and 44 graduates earned their diplomas by completing their graduation requirements at Everest Satellite High School. Let's give them a round of applause. We also would like to recognize, as a part of our celebrations, our 2024 Scholarship Award recipients. A huge congratulations to the class of 2024 from both Belvedere High School and North, who received scholarships totaling over $250,000 towards furthering their education at the annual scholarship ceremony on May 16th. Also, congratulations to those students. Next on our agenda, we have Champions of Democracy Award. Tonight, we have Carol Bailey, chairperson from the Voter Services Committee and the League of Women Voters of Greater Rockford, to present the Champions of Democracy Award to Belvedere North High School Student Voice Club. The Student Voice Club, under the tutelage of Dr. Teresa Kruger, demonstrates its commitment to democracy and voting rights by hosting an outstanding voter registration drive on November 17, 2023. Dr. Kruger led the Student Voice Club to engage in what could only be described as an all-school pep rally, from sending postcards to all students eligible to register to vote, creating posters and engaging their classmates, to building excitement surrounding the League of Women Voters' presence. Their efforts led to one of the highest voter registrations of all area high schools in Winnebago and Boone counties. 95 students in all registered to vote on that day. The atmosphere was incredible, and the participation of staff and teachers really demonstrated what an outstanding school Belvedere North really is. In addition, once again, the Student Voice Club got to work to organize, host, and volunteer at the meet and greet, which was held in March of this year for the entire community.
We have Carol and Dr. Kruger here this evening. Come on forward.
I'm Sue Thedeen. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters, and Carol is our Voter Services Chair. And I just wanted to add just a little bit to that, just real briefly, is we love working with Belvedere North High School. It's been really great. Not only do you have super teachers that have really empowered the Student Voice Club and the other students, but we've actually established kind of two best practices that we're sharing with other high schools in the area. So the first one, of course, was the school board, when the school board candidate forum last year, when the Student Voice Club took the initiative to have the forum that many of you participated in. So that was really great work that they did. And the second one was the way we register voters. So as Carol was saying, the teachers invited us into the school, into the classrooms, and we would just sit and talk to the students a little bit, register them. It was a really relaxed, chill way to do it, and that was really super successful. So now we've shared that best practice with some of the Rockford high schools, and that's just our go-to way. Even when we go to universities now, we no longer sit in the cafeteria and wait for students to stop by. We go into the social studies classes typically. So thank you very much for all the great work, and let's hear it for the team. Is here representing the Student Voice Club, and Maria is one of our other great voter service members.
Maria, if you want to come back, we'll have all of you kind of come in the front for a picture, if you wouldn't mind. Yeah, Janine, I'll take your picture.
Thank you.
we just are really proud of the work of the Voice Club and Dr. Kruger. And Dr. Kruger, I know you have some partners in crime over there. Did you want to recognize them?
Sure. My colleagues, Mr. Luis Salinas and Mr. Daniel Avila are also co-sponsors of the Student Voice Club.
No, we appreciate all of you do. And thank you so much to the League of Women Voters who have come forward multiple times to assist us with these events. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I know we had one retiree. Did we have any other retirees out there in the audience? I was just wondering if maybe Miss Brenner should get a picture with our retiree who is here.
Oh, you sure? Let's do
I
it.
think we should. Right?
That's you. What?
We're doing a picture. You're gonna stand up for a I love it. You look like you're already retired with
That's
that.
right, he's on his way to Hawaii.
Yeah, practicing.
Little tan. Yay.
All right, we also have many staff members to recognize this evening. The following people have been nominated by their peers for going above and beyond in District 100. Please know again, because of how many we have, which is a good problem to have, that we go through when we receive them, and so people might not be recognized each month because we get through the list of who we have. Again, thank you so much for continuing to send your shout outs so we can recognize the outstanding staff we have here in District 100, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Shug.
Okay, I'm gonna read the names, and if you're in the audience, come on forward, so we can give you your recognition card and take your picture. Krista Schmalanese from Meehan Krista has brought so many fun and new ideas to the team. She is a great person to collaborate with. She is going above and beyond to create and provide materials for all students. Her dedication sets a high standard for all of us, and we're grateful to have you on our team. Is Krista here? All right. What about Lorraine? Oh, yes, let's still applaud Krista. I don't see Lorena either, but I'm going to read Lorena Campos. Mrs. Campos is a dual language para in our first grade pod with a kind heart and the biggest smile. She goes above and beyond for all the teachers and students she works with. Mrs. Campos works with students one-on-one to help them reach their goals. She has formed strong bonds with her students, and the children absolutely adore her. In the rare free moment that Mrs. Campos might have, she reaches out to teachers to see how she can support them. It doesn't matter who needs help or what you might need, Mrs. Campos is always there to help with a smile. District 100 is a better place to learn and work with Mrs. Campos at Seth Whitman. I see this person, Rebecca Landy from Washington. Rebecca does an amazing job bringing teams together to ensure individualized and inclusive learning experiences for all students. She brings a calm and positive energy to her team and is a person I can count on regularly to collaborate and problem solve with. Thank you, Rebecca. Amber Rather. Our buildings technology at Washington wouldn't run as effectively as it does without Amber at Washington. She is an amazing technology specialist. Not only does she solve every issue that she takes on, but she does so with an extremely speedy response. If a problem comes to her and she isn't able to fix it, she immediately finds the right person. Amber is awesome at her job, and I'm glad to be a team member of hers here at Washington. Jessica Zick. Jessica is extremely creative with the projects that she does with her students. It's fun to see our hallways decorated with beautiful artistic pieces of art. Jessica is also an awesome specials teammate. She is always on board to collaborate with us PE teachers and our music teams. Go Washington Special Teams. June is a tough month for these. We're missing a few more, but I want you to know that these people are fantastic, and we know that we pushed them all the way off till June. So we're glad you're here with us, Rebecca, but we are also going to recognize Allie Schillingberg. Allie is one of the most caring and committed educators I have worked with. She advocates for all her students, especially when individual needs are not being met. She collaborates with different teams so that she is aware of how students are doing outside of her classroom. She always offers assistance to those around her, especially when unexpected things occur. Past students always come to Ms. Schilley's classroom as they like to celebrate events or things happening in 7th grade. They worry and come find me when she's not there. Students who are no longer in the same building will email her to let her know how they're doing at their current school. She truly cares about all our students, and our students very well know that. Yay, Allie. Stacy McGuffin. Mrs. McGuffin goes above and beyond to ensure that learning is accessible to all students at BHS. She ensures that students and staff have digital tools to enhance learning in the classroom. Her work with colleagues is centered in collaborative conversations about lessons that have clear desired outcomes, utilizations of multimodal instruction, and the use of feedback from students to guide the pace of instruction. Mrs. McGuffin's skill set and expertise of instructional strategies have made me a much better teacher, and I want to take a moment to publicly thank her. I am proud to work alongside Mrs. McGuffin every day. Aaron Gonzalez. No. Aaron Gonzalez works at First Student. Mr. Gonzalez, I love this story. Mr. Gonzalez, a first student bus driver for Caledonia Elementary, emulates service excellence. On Valentine's Day, one of our students left her Valentine's at the bus stop that morning and did not realize until the bus was already at Cal. Mr. Gonzalez explained when his morning route was complete, he would return to the bus stop, pick up the Valentines, and bring them to Caledonia. This gesture meant the world to the student and ensured that her Valentine's celebration at school was not ruined. Mr. Gonzalez continues to build excellent relationships with our students, and we are fortunate to have him working with our students. Thank you to everyone for all their hard work over this school year, and we appreciate all of that. Yeah. Oh.
All right, next on our agenda, we have board member celebrations. If anyone on the board would like to share a positive event or activity they heard or were engaged with over the past month or a few months, since we haven't had it in a while, feel free to do this at this time.
I'd like to shout out the principals and staff at the high schools. Graduation was this month, or last month, and it's always, I confess that in the days leading up to graduation as a board member, I'm always kind of like, oh, okay, there's my Saturday, and then every year I go, and it's just the sweetest, most positive. It's the most fun thing I do as a board member, honestly. And our principals they've got it down to an art. They really do. They've got it down to a science. It's super organized. The kids are super well behaved. I've been on the board 11 years now. I've never seen an issue at graduation, and this year was no exception. So it was a really fun, nice day.
Yeah, that was mine. You stole mine.
Ha!
But I will add a little to it. We've had them at RVC, and we've had them a few times here at the stadiums. And I always love when we're at the stadiums. You could just feel a little more pride in the students and the staff. And this year was no different. So it was a beautiful day. Kids were great. Staff was great. I don't know how they do it, but they do. So that was mine as well.
Well, Holly just stole mine.
I'm sorry.
What was I going to say? It's great to have the graduations at the two high schools. it does. It should mean a lot. I mean, when I graduated from Belvedere High School, I remember graduating from the stadium, like a front of the stadium. So it just, you're there at the school you're graduating from, the kids are walking through the hallways, getting ready to come out to the football field. It's all meaningful as they get ready for this next chapter in life. So if we continue to, hopefully we can continue to do that at the football stadiums. Because it's probably a special moment for these kids. And it was for me back in the day. So that's all I have to add.
I'll add a little to that. How you feel about that is, I like the scholarship night, which I didn't get to go to this year. And I was actually kind of bummed, because I think that's a neat night where you can see a lot of the good things going on in our quiz bowl teams. So.
Huge.
I'd just like to do a quick one of the retirees. I've worked with a lot of them, knew some of them pretty well. Some I didn't work with, I know pretty well too. And hope they enjoy their retirement. I think the district lost a lot of talent in that group.
I would like to commend the board, the administration, the staff family, and students in the entire process that we worked through over the last 3 months, really, 2 months actively at Perry. Regardless of the outcome of how it had gone, I think everybody involved was receptive and open, and I think it was a testament to everybody's commitment to the process being difficult, but a commitment to remain positive and engaged without accusation throughout the process. So I much appreciated the process.
I just want to give a shout out in general to all of our staff for finishing another year. There's a lot of things that aren't huge highlights that we don't recognize at the board meeting always, but make big differences. So, things like the bus driver example, there's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on a regular basis that's not always formally recognized. So I really appreciate that. Likewise, there's a lot of staff that still work all summer, whether it's doing our summer school support or just making sure our facilities are clean or organized or meetings are set up. So just overall, I want to thank all staff, regardless of role, for another year in their work. And even again, if you're not formally recognized, those efforts don't go unnoticed for the work that you do. All right, switching gears, we're going to talk next. I have our board and Board of Education committee reports. And now we'll have our Board of Education committee reports. Our first, we'll start with Educational Services. From May 30th, Ms. Mayville or Mrs. Hauk, do you have anything you'd like to highlight or share regarding educational service minutes?
I do not.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Mayville or Mrs. Hauk, or Dr. Johnson or Dr. Carson? All right. Next on the agenda is Business Services Committee meeting from June 4th. Mr. Herrera or Mr. Bucher, do you have anything you'd like to highlight or share regarding business services minutes?
I think it'll come up later, so no.
Yeah, we'll be voting on some items in consent.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Herrera, Mr. Bucher, or Mrs. Armstrong? Okay, and lastly, Policy and Personnel from June 12th. Mr. Zickert, do you have anything you'd like to highlight or share regarding Policy and Personnel minutes?
No, I think most of the questions I got were on some of the things that were in personnel. I just wanted you to know that, because then I don't have to worry about saying it later, is that when we do these committee things, at the very end, Dr. Shug always asks, do we move them forward or not move them forward? And I'm of the belief, even though there was a difference of opinions, many different opinions, or a few different opinions, there were only like 5 people there, so it wasn't many, it was a few, is that I still think they ought to move forward anyway, no matter what, because 2 people shouldn't decide whether the full board gets to see them or not, and the full board gets to weigh in on them. So I'm just saying that to say that some of these had more support than others, but don't think they all were unanimous, but don't think they all were not any support at all either. There was a mixed support for quite a few of them, but that's why they came forward, was because I think that's, in my opinion, that's what we should do.
Any questions for Mr. Zickert? All right. At this time, members of the public and employees of District 100, oh, I forgot, I apologize, jumping back. And also from Policy and Personnel Committee, the first reading of Policy 2:40, Board member qualifications. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding the first reading of policy 2:40, board member qualifications, before it comes to the board in July for final reading and vote?
So there was a lot of discussion last month about the process by which students would be selected. Can any insight be given? I see the way it reads, the board will annually appoint a student ambassador from each school. What became of the varied input from the board, and how did we land on, what will the process be?
I think there was there was some discussion on that from the people there. There was a variety of opinions, much like there kind of were on the board in a way. So I think that there wasn't any definitive, yeah, we should do it this way or that way. I mean, there was rationale given for both. I think that having the broadest spectrum of choosing may have been the best. I mean, I know Sarah wasn't there, but Cassandra was, if I'm messing this up, but I think that there was not agreement. There wasn't any agreement on how to do it, because I don't think anybody wanted to say exactly how to do it, because some of the people there weren't directly affected by it anyway, in a way, or didn't think they would be, so they didn't want to weigh in other than to say, yeah, I like this, or I like that, and sporadically jumped in, but there wasn't any great consensus on how to do it.
Well, and what the committee sort of concluded was to move this forward for a first read,
Right.
and then potentially a second read, and if it were to go forward, then we would work some more on those process pieces. So the actual description of the process itself would still come back to the board for some fine tuning, because I know we talked about, would we elect them, would we appoint them, would there be an interview, would there not?
Right.
So the board isn't voting on that part of the process right now, just that we would have a student ambassador, and if that is the case, we would pull together a team to really look at, is this the way we want that language to be written? I think the board's made some really good comments about engaging with the student councils, and we thought that that might be a good place to go to as well to get some feedback.
So, help me understand if I'm understanding you correctly. This is the first reading, the way that it
Correct.
indicates, but can you repeat what you just said about, but then once it gets through the second reading, we'll assemble a team and then we'll talk about the language?
Not the language in the
Okay.
policy,
Okay,
but the language in the, how that policy is gonna be executed. So
Okay.
typically, that's what we do, right? We approve a policy, and then, for example, we approved the executive summary template, right? We're gonna do an executive summary, so this month, we figured out, okay, the board approved this, how are we gonna do this, and then we will roll it out next month. We would do the same thing here, that the board approves this, says, yep, this is the direction we wanna go, we've got a basic structure, but now we will really meet out how we in fact
Okay.
want that to go, and then execute it.
okay. So differently than the standard first and second reading of policies, where typically then at that point, it reverts to administration, and an administrative process is launched and then rolled out. It doesn't really come back to the board again. You're saying this would in fact be managed differently than that?
Because this particular
Okay.
process, I think, is very specific to the board's role, you are appointing a student ambassador to sit in the board, I think we would definitely still seek some additional input on that part of the process, yes. I would anticipate that. I mean, and again, not every policy is gonna require that.
Right, I've never had it happen before, that a policy would do anything other than go to administration, and then they would, through the execution of the administrative procedures, assemble the APs and release them to the teams and staff. But you're saying in this particular case, it will deviate from what is a standard practice that has worked for,
Yes, I could say a few more things, but I'm gonna say yes, cause that is correct, Lisa.
okay.
I would just look at the policy, I mean, I read it because I was there, but I hope we also, when we look at the implementation of it, we look to expand some of it too, because I think there's a lot of other opportunities that I think their services would be as beneficial or more beneficial than this,
Yep.
so.
Any other comments, feedback, questions? All right. Next on the agenda, we have public comment. At this time, members of the public and employees of District 100 may make public comments. As a reminder, any person appearing before the board is expected to Address the board only at the appropriate time and follow the directives of the board president to maintain order and decorum. Identify oneself, limit comments to 3 minutes, and conduct oneself with respect and civility towards others, and otherwise abide by board policy 8:30, visitors to and conduct on school property. Do we have anyone wishing to address the board this evening? We'll get you the podium here in the mic.
I need stuff.
I need a step stool.
Yeah.
It's an adjustable.
First off, I'm Brett Taylor. You said Carl. I don't go by that. Anyway, head custodian at Lincoln Elementary, vice president of BESA Union. First off, I'd like to thank everybody here for what you do. If it weren't for you, there'd be a lot of chaos. There always is, but you guys try to keep it at a minimal. So it is a thankless job most of the time. You do very well. I know a lot of you, worked with a lot of you, and it's been a pleasure. I want to thank you for allowing me to attend the meetings to represent our group, the maintenance, custodial, and grounds people. Just want to say our experience with our contract negotiations were awesome, very, very pleasant, and everyone was so receptive, and we really, really appreciate it. So I just want to say thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody further wish to address the board, please come forward at this time and state your name. All right, next on the agenda are consent agenda items. Are there any items on the consent agenda any members of the board would like to take out for separate consideration? Thank you, Denise. Hearing none, do I have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda items 2 through 15 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Hauk seconded the motion to approve consent agenda items 2 through 15 as presented. Any discussion? Okay, roll call please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Ms. Maybell.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 7-0. Next on the agenda are roll call action items. First, we have District 100's budget amendment for July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. Do I have a motion and a second to approve District 100's budget amendment for July 1st, 2023 through June 30, 2024 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Hauk seconded the motion to approve District 100's budget amendment for July 1st, 2023 through June 30, 2024 as presented. Any discussion? Roll call please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Ms. Maybell.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 7-0. Next on the agenda, we have our organic life renewal. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the 1-year extension of the District Food Management Services contract with Organic Life for FY '25 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Hauk seconded the motion to approve the 1-year extension of the District Food Management Services contract with Organic Life for FY '25 as presented. Discussion?
Yeah, I guess after did we finally, because a little while ago, we weren't too fond of Organic Life. And there was a large amount of money that was in dispute. So I'm taking it, all things have changed and we got paid and we're looking at things much better than before, or?
Yes, when we went out to bid, after the incident with the commodities, we went out to bid last year and you were allowed under statute to award a one-year contract with 4 renewals. This year, I am very pleased, and I kind of put that in my summary, that they have now done full credits for 100% of our commodities, as they should. They've also instituted the student and parent menu advisory that I had been asking for. So quarterly, we meet with students and parents to get input on our menus and our planning. We were awarded the National School Lunch Program Equipment Grant for the first time, which brought in some induction walks, new ovens, cooler. They've really stepped up and become a partner in what I was looking for in our food service. So I think we are going to continue to see a lot of improvement over the next couple of years.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mr. Bucher.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed, 7-0. Next on the agenda, high school schedule proposal. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the memorandum of agreement, MOA, with the BEA and adjust the 2024-2025 school year calendar to include weekly late starts for high schools as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Mayville made a motion and Member Herrera seconded the motion to approve the memorandum of agreement, MOA, with the BEA and adjust the 2024-2025 school year calendar to include weekly late start for high schools as presented. Discussion?
Yeah, I was on the committee, and we wrestled a lot with this thing, at least I think they did. There's a variety of topics being discussed over the course of the thing, and I will tell up front that, and I've told him personally too, I thought Dave did an outstanding job of navigating through the on task, not on task, trying to come to a conclusion, not come to a conclusion, so on and so forth. So I think he did, I've told him that, I think he did a wonderful job of that. My only issue was like some of the stuff I think is, we need, like the late starts. I think the teachers will find useful time for that. I'm not against that. I will say the only thing that I have trepidation about is that whenever we do stuff like this, as I've discussed with Dr. Carson too, we gotta sell it. And we have to have the doubting, we have to have the answers for the doubters that don't think this is such a great idea, that this is what it's gonna, this is the benefit, this is what you're gonna get, this is why it's a good thing. I've gotten correspondence from teachers who work in the district, who have kids in the district that aren't as enamored with it as others are, so to speak. And it's more than a few. It's not many, but it's more than 2 or 3 too, that they think what we have now, most people think was sufficient. I don't think, some of them look at it as, in some aspects, there wasn't a big outcry to change what we have now. But obviously we didn't do the late start before and some of this other stuff. So I'm on the fence on this because I'm not sure we sold it as much as we should have or could have before we actually do it. So that's my opinion.
First question, what is is there a net negative of overall instructional time due to this?
7.5 minutes per class per semester, is that right?
That's correct.
Per class per semester?
Yep.
And we couldn't find a way to make that up somewhere? And here's I didn't have tons of people.
Total 7.5
So-
minutes
Oh, total,
per class per semester.
okay. Here was the feedback that I got, and it wasn't tons of people, but it was similar to what Matt says, that they didn't feel like this was a huge thing that they needed. And most of the kids that I talked to and the parents said they thought they got what they needed out of the way we had it already. So what, I just don't know, I mean, is this a net gain? I don't know. I'm indifferent on it.
I think one thing that really one thing I really like about it is that in the past, we've seen that the win days at the end of first they just came at the end of the semester, and then we started instituting them, I believe, at the end of the quarter as well. They really worked. And the way they worked was that the subset of kids who have the ability to achieve but procrastinate and don't do the work, use these days to get in and get their grades up at the end of the quarter, at the end of the semester. And that's not all they're used for, but there's a substantial number of kids who use them that way. And obviously, that's not the best way to learn and retain anything. You know, they're cramming stuff in, they're pushing, they're doing 400 assignments in 2 days. It's not great. It's successful in that they, you know, pass or get a C instead of a D or a B instead of a C, but educationally it's not super great. So what this does is it takes essentially that time and spreads it out throughout the semester so that hopefully, and part of this also is the implementation of a system that will allow teachers to assign kids to win. So a teacher, you know, if Dr. Johnson is teaching a class and, you know, Carla's failing that class, she can enter into her computer to assign me to go to win for her class for a particular day. So this not only spreads those win minutes out throughout the semester so that hopefully kids will kind of stay on task throughout the semester, but it also provides, part of this is providing a mechanism for teachers to assign students to come to them when it's needed. So that, you know, this isn't, I mean, I was on the committee too, and we talked about some possible big changes, you know, and the teachers and staff on the committee did a lot of work, I know, talking to other school districts that have completely different school days and schedules, and we sort of winnowed through those, and I think that if there's one thing there was a general consensus on the committee was that we could make we hope to make some pretty decent size impact with what are fairly small changes to the schedule. And I know, you know, Mrs. Taylor was on the committee, and she provided input from teachers that she heard from, and hopefully she'll correct me if I misstate her conclusion, but she sort of told us, you know, there weren't too many people that loved every single thing about it, but there also weren't too many people who hated every single thing about it. And when you're doing something like this, you're always going to have people who say, well, I like this, accept this, or I like this, accept this. But we had a really well-rounded, I think, membership on our committee. We had the principals and counselors, and we had teachers, and we had administration, and I think people felt really good where we came out here. And there were a lot of meetings. We had a lot of meetings on this, and we had really good discussion. I think we solicited feedback as best as we could. Dr. Carson did a really good job of talking to people and trying to do focus groups and getting input from students and teachers and parents and the principals. And so I didn't know how I felt about it as the process was going on, and at the end here, I think we came up with something that can be really good.
I would just like to take back for just 1 second to your question, Mr. Booker, as well, is that anytime we start a research study process, we begin with that compelling why. So this process started with a compelling why when we brought it to the board initially. How long ago was that now, Dr. Carson?
August? No, it was before that. It was maybe
Before
a year
that.
ago. I think it was
It's like last
June.
summer.
Beginning of the year,
Last June.
and it starts with a compelling why. So there were concerns that needed to be specifically addressed. I don't know, Dr. Carson, if you wanted to share that.
If I can just jump in before you, I remember that, and at the time, it was having one big win day was not believed to be the better alternative, right? To separate it up. Is that correct?
Well, there
How
were,
it started?
well, I'll let Dr. Carson, because there's
It actually
a
started
little
with a
bit more
different
than that,
Yeah,
yeah.
so previous to the scheduling committee, we had a secondary intervention committee that was looking at how do we help improve our graduation rate. That was really what the driving force was. How do we help more kids to be on track and graduate on time? And that's where we came up with two solutions. One is the student success intervention that's in place, was put in place this year, where kids have a really supportive environment to help them do some credit recovery and be successful in their current classes. And then the other was to start Link Crew, which will launch in August. And they went through training this year to get ready for that. And that committee said, well, based on what they learned from other schools, part of what we need is regular intervention time for our freshmen to be on track. And well, if you know high school scheduling, the challenge is you can't just put freshman intervention while everyone else is off in classes, right? Yes, everyone has to be somewhere. And so when we met this year to begin our work in August, that's what happened in August, was our first meeting at Belvedere North. Before we dug into a particular model, we took time to get feedback from staff and students about what do you like and what do you not like about the current schedule. And that's part of what was shared in the proposal. And it's almost 63% of staff said they don't have enough time to help their students. And 64.7% of students share that they have a tough time managing their workload with the current schedule. So there were some clear indicators that was on top of the focus groups and other feedback mechanisms we had that showed that there is an interest in improving WIN. So it's not just that we're adding more of it, that we're also looking to add features like the scheduling and tracking. And part of it is to be very intentional. So as opposed to coming to Mrs. Mayville's classroom for any and all work associated with their class, you're going to come to get help on a specific topic or with a specific task, so that the teacher and the students can really be focused with that time, as opposed to trying to manage anything and everything that's ever happened in our classroom with kids. We're also working on adding more enrichments, because we recognize not all students need the help and intervention time. And so our counseling team is really excited about being able to coordinate college speakers, as opposed to, much like you heard with League of Women Voters, right? Having them come into a classroom session instead of taking them away from lunch, having career speakers come in. And now we're switching to ACT, in case you haven't heard. Back to ACT, we can do some ACT prep work, AP course prep. So there's lots of ideas for what are some enrichment opportunities that can be provided during WIN that students can be assigned to or could select to go to if that's the position that they're in. So there were interests in expanding WIN and definitely enhancing WIN. There were also interests, as you alluded to, Carla, in doing away with WIN. I mean, that was definitely some perspective that was shared as well. But the majority fell on the side of we want more and we want better WIN time with kids.
And I just wanted to come back to that because the strategic plan really is guiding us to make sure that everything we're doing in these big projects like this is linked to those goals we have established in that strategic plan. And everything's going to start with that compelling why. And that was a year ago, so it can get hard to remember what it was that started that and feel like at the end, are we solving a problem we didn't have? But we very clearly identified that problem as it related to the district's data and needs, and then work to address it. And I think Dr. Carson and Ms. Mayville and Mr. Zickert all made really clear that there is no perfect high school schedule. There are going to be good things about this and challenges with it, but that this, I believe, is fundamentally better than what we have because it better meets the needs that we identified at the beginning of the process. And again, the board will vote however the board wants to vote, but that was really what the task was, and that's where I think the end product came. And I really appreciate Mr. Zickert and Ms. Mayville's participation on that committee because I know it was probably a heavier lift than they anticipated it might be at the beginning.
I think the one thing I think that we needed to look at was that some of the people looked at it is that I was at North one day when they had WIN Day. I was there observing a new way of teaching math at North. So I was there in the morning when they had WIN Day that day. And there was always the talk about how many of those kids are in the cafeteria. The number of kids in the cafeteria doing nothing during WIN Day. And there were, Mr. Frinson was pretty accurate. I think he said about 150, 125 to 150. I think he was in the ballpark. May have been a little more, but I don't think it was that far off, if any. But I think we have to realize that's 15% of North's population was in the cafeteria at that time doing whatever they wanted to do. And I didn't even know, I hear from some of those teachers, some are in the hallways or whatever. But I mean, you can get lost and do whatever you want during a time like that if you really want to. And you can get the help if you really want to. I mean, they're teenage kids. I just think it's one of those things where, don't hold out for perfect all the time, but if we had instead of ideas and some definitive plans of what we're gonna do for enrichment, and we had things those kids could go to, and we had it structured before we did it, I'd be more comfortable with it than I am now. Because there's a lot of components of it that are good. I mean, there are some good components of it by far. And I also think that when we look at evaluating it, you're right, the compelling why was to improve the graduation rate, it was for kids to do better in their classes and stuff like that. I think we have to look at how we're measuring it, because some of the naysayers honestly think that we're letting them get by with less strenuous things that we did before, just to meet the numbers and so on. I'm not saying we're doing it, I'm just saying that's what the naysayers say. And I think we have to have empirical evidence to show them that's not true. So.
Yeah, I ask a lot of questions, and I appreciate the fact that there were a number of answers over a myriad of months that were provided, very statistical details, right down to minutes and all of those sorts of things, as well as, more idea-based, here's thoughts, et cetera. So for me, the concerns surround I think there is a strong desire and intention for there to be enrichment opportunities. And I believe that there's even been some work done to begin to evaluate what those could look like. But we're not evaluating instituting this, we're actually instituting it. So for me, that's where the disconnect is, that when this passes tonight, and I certainly anticipate that it will, that there be a lot of significant work done to take those enrichment things from the idea that teachers are going to, teachers will be tasked with providing enrichment. That several emails I got, provided that input, and that they're gonna collaborate and that they're gonna come up with ideas and things, but that those will be ready to go when this schedule is implemented, because the schedule is, if it's passed tonight, we're doing this in August. So, we're now out of school, and I hate for teachers to have to do any more work over the summer than they already do. But for me, that's a big enough obstacle.
I don't think teachers are going to be tasked with providing enrichment.
I think there'll be choices as departments. There was discussion among the committee members that the departments would work on together, putting together some enrichment opportunities.
I think that's what you
But
said,
counselors in
that
particular.
there'll be
Yeah.
collaboration, but that there would be.
It would be counselors, admin, putting together opportunities, and certainly teachers can, if they want to invite a speaker to come in and do something, certainly they can do that, but I'm not sure even we can require teachers to provide enrichment opportunities.
Well, we would not task that over the
Yeah.
summer, certainly, that would not be an expectation over the summer.
No.
And the other thing too, so this has been similar the last few years that was referenced before, is at the start of the school year, they, really there's two functions for that time. There's advisory, they call it Northway at Belvedere North and Bug Club at Belvedere High School. And a lot of that is just learning the ropes of being in high school and what's going on in the year. So that's where they go over drill procedures, they go over, just the rules and expectations, they spend time getting ready. When it comes to testing time, that's where they're double checking their bubble sheets, those types of things. And my point is, the beginning of the year, it tends to be very heavy on that advisory purpose. And so the first weeks of the school year, that's gonna be planned out by the principals in consultation. Link Crew is gonna be doing a lot of work during that time. And then once we get to the first progress report, which is 3-4 weeks into the semester, that's when we'll start offering more of that that intervention and enrichment opportunities. So there will be some time for that transition as well.
I would also like to state that I'm happy that this has been revisited, in addition to some of the why that you spoke of, Dr. Shug, with the strategic plan and the work of the prior committees. This is a topic that came up in the previous negotiations as a shared interest to continue to focus on and look at high school schedule. And not all those things we were able to address in the recent contract. And so having this MOA allows us to do some of those things that were a follow-up. And I think that speaks value to our unions that we have a dedicated effort to follow up in relation to those things that we wanted to do previously but weren't able to get to. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just think if it does pass, that we need to make sure we really make this work. Because I think there's a lot of people enough people, maybe not a lot, but enough people that are skeptical And I think to make them unskeptical would be a good thing. And that we could do that by showing this really is a great thing and showing it by actually pulling off all the things we think we can.
Okay, roll call, please.
Ms. Mabel.
Aye.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
No.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
No,
Mrs. Hauk.
Aye.
Mrs. Brunner.
Aye. Motion passed, 5-2. Next on the agenda, District 100 Alternative High School Diploma. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the District 100 Alternative High School Diploma structure as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion, and Member Hauk seconded the motion to approve the District 100 Alternative High School Diploma structure as presented. Discussion?
What's I know it's to increase the graduation rate, I get that, but outside of that, what's the compelling why for doing this? I mean,
Do
these
you
are
wanna speak to that, or do you
the
wanna-
different, especially the different standards.
So there's some scenarios that are prompting that, and that's what was included in the presentation. And so certainly there are and this is meant to be for a handful of students on a given year, total across the districts, not, and it's for students with extenuating circumstances. Again, the presentation outlines some circumstances that we often see on a very small case basis. One that's growing is the number of students that are coming to the States and are brand new to our school system and sometimes showing up without any kind of transcripted credit. And so we have 16, 17-year-old students enrolling, and if we put them on a 4 or 5 year course sequence, that takes them to where they're going to age out and they can't continue in our school system. Or even if not aging out, it's definitely a barrier to them wanting to pursue their high school diploma. And so that's what's prompting this. It is the graduation rate ultimately, but again, this is a response to a very, very, very small portion of our high school population.
And I would share that it was definitely a much smaller process than the high school schedule study because it was gonna impact a much smaller number of students. But we felt the compelling why was the needs of our newcomer students that really needed to be addressed in a timely fashion so that they would have an opportunity to graduate. And that was the need that we saw, and Dr. Carson and Mr. Lascola, I think, did some excellent work in terms of researching what we could do to address that need very quickly.
Any other
so
questions?
so they're not gonna receive a traditional high school diploma, they're not gonna be able to participate in graduation, and they would be able to re-enroll after receiving an alternative diploma to earn a full diploma. Okay, so I get
No,
that.
They will not.
They will not, oh, that's right, will not be able to re-enroll, okay. And I know we're doing lots and lots of things, I just think this is a great point at which to say, very limited group of students, with the exception of sort of other duties as assigned on job descriptions, we get to the very bottom, and that, it has to be there, I understand we have to have unique cases and evaluated on a case-by-case basis. But I think we have to be also continuing, because we're doing it, I know, to very aggressively be looking at how we can get these kids to traditional diplomas, right?
Totally
Because
agree.
they're gonna get something that makes us, hopefully, help them feel like they were supported and all of those things, but it's not a traditional high school diploma. And for some of them, that's the best alternative, right? They come here when they're 16 years old and they're new to the country, and there's no way they're gonna get from point A to point, Z in enough time. But I just want us to continue to plow forward with the ways that are gonna allow us to really truly use these in as limited occasions as possible.
Thank you, and I appreciate that feedback, and I think we feel really strongly that we aren't where we wanna be, but that this provides a fix for what we need immediately.
I agree, I really like this for newcomers, if we know it takes at least 5 to 7 years to learn a language, they don't even have that, and so I like that we're able to give them something, knowing many of them don't speak a language that we can even instruct on in school, so I think this is great for those students.
I just, and I know we'll probably be diligent with this, make sure it's a language barrier, not a knowledge barrier, because I don't want,
Yep.
I've watched on TV kids that have gotten diplomas from other school districts that have gotten on 13 Investigates or whatever, and it showed their resumes they fill out and stuff, and they're interesting to say the least, and they graduated. And I think, and some of them have a difficult time even reading. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't apply to somebody because it's a language thing, but I hope we don't use it for knowledge barriers too.
Yep, I appreciate that feedback as well.
Any other discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 7-0. Next on the agenda, we have additional sick days for employee 061724-A. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the additional sick days for employee 061724-A as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Mayville made a motion and Member Hauk seconded the motion to approve the additional sick days for employee 061724-A as presented. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Mayville.
No.
Mrs. Hauk.
No.
Mr. Zickert.
No.
Mr. Booker.
No.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
No.
Mr. Herrera.
No.
Mrs. Brenner.
No. Motion failed, 0-7. Next on the agenda, notice to remedy for employee 061724-B. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the notice to remedy for employee 061724-B as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the notice to remedy for employee 061724-B as presented. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed, 7-0. Next on the agenda, ROE Student Support Specialist. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the ROE Student Support Specialist at BHS and Washington Academy as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the ROE Student Support Specialist at Belvedere High School and Washington Academy as presented. Discussion?
Yeah, so I'd asked some questions previously, and I got some of the answers, but I couldn't kind of tease out all of them. It's indicated that this is a full-time ROE employee. So what happens in the event that it's not a good fit, or it's not going well, or, I mean, obviously they're not our employee, we can't discipline their employee of the ROE. Hopefully it goes well, I'm just saying, we have to see around that corner, right? What happens there?
We would work with the ROE on a dismissal, and then we would place a new person in that role in cooperation with the ROE.
And have they given any insight as to with what, if any, frequency it occurs that there is a disruption in the placement, whether the individual leaves and or there's a disruption because it's not a fit with that school district?
I don't believe we asked that particular question, so I couldn't say that. We could certainly find out that information and follow up with that.
I just wonder what the lag time is typically in a situation like that, because then we put our eggs in this basket, right, and we're structuring some programming surrounding, hopefully, resolving some additional issues that exist. And if we end up in a situation that is outside of our control, as it was with, Effective School Solutions, we were dependent on them to hire, they couldn't hire, we were much more delayed in getting things going than we anticipated. That's once bitten, twice shy, I guess, maybe. Do they have a stable of people who are just ready to be deployed because of the grant money, or are they looking to hire the same way we would be looking to hire? Are they having to beat the, bushes to find candidates, or do we have these people, in wait?
I do not believe they have these people in wait. They would go through any of the same processes that we would go through. We aren't hiring certified staff, so there is a broader pool. Dr. Johnson, Dr. Carson, anything you wanted to add?
I would just say it's a fairly new process for this ROE, so they're working with another ROE that has about a 10-year history with this. They were upfront with us that it could potentially take till October, so we're just kind of making the schools aware. I will say one thing about this is probably a layer of students that we aren't able to spend a substantial amount of time with currently. So our most needy students are still going to be with our counselors, our social workers, and our interventionists. This is an additional layer, so I would say when the person is hired and able to start, we're able to connect with some more students that potentially are not being connected with at this point.
Right, which I think is great, but we're acknowledging going in that these are kids who are falling through the cracks a bit in the amount of time that we can focus on them. So then if we find ourselves with a disruption to the process because a staff, they're delayed in hiring or they're delayed in, someone leaves, they take another job, right? Anytime you're employed in a position that is grant dependent, the grant money goes away and then what? What's our fallback? So all of those things give me concern because of what and again, not the district's fault in any way, shape or form, but we had, such delay with, and again, these two entities have nothing to do with each other, so I'm not indicating that Effective School Solutions and this entity operate in the same way, but I'm saying, we're grant dependent for dollars, we pay for the first year, but they don't have anybody ready, so we say yes to doing it, we still think we won't have anybody till October, which I appreciate that they're candid about that. Additionally, we acknowledge we're going in with kids who maybe we don't have the ability to reach right now, and there's a disruption in the place. I don't know. It's hard because, of course, I appreciate what you're saying about this as a population of kids who are maybe falling through the cracks right now, but then all the more reason why we don't want to hold out hope, give these kids an anchor to hang on to, and then, the bottom falls out because grant dollars go away or, I don't know, I don't know. Something's better than nothing, if we get something, I don't know.
Well, and we did decide to start with 2 positions as
Yeah.
opposed to going with more positions to see how effective the process was, how working with the ROE was. Once the individuals are in the system, again, the ROE continues to fund them moving forward. So
As
depending
long
on
as
how
funds
this,
remain available to them.
as long as those
Right.
funds remain available,
Yeah.
so it's possible we could look to expand this if this is something that works well, or look to discontinue it if it's something that doesn't work well.
I guess I looked at all, I even said, when we were at the policy committee meeting, I've talked about some of this before, so at least a couple people or one person's gonna be bored. But, when we look at these, each one of these, is this one and some of the ones coming up, all look good individually. They're all, you could make a valid, and there was discussion on policy about all these. They all separately by themselves are plausible and have some very good redeeming characteristics. The problem is, for me, is we need to look at this in the big picture. We cut a lot of stuff lately when we did ESSER and stuff like that, yet lately, in the last couple months, we've been adding a lot of stuff, but not even considering what we cut before. And maybe we have, I don't know if they have, if we have, I never heard about it, and that never came up in policy, that when we talked about this stuff, as we add these things, they're costing us money, and it's not a lot. I understand it's not a lot, but some of the stuff we got rid of wasn't a lot either. And I think when we go forward with this, if we really think we're deficit spending, was it 1.8 million or 1.9 million? Because we were gonna write it off as, well, we really don't. Every time we say we are, we never deficit spend anyway, kind of thing, on the ESSER money, that we can't continue to keep adding stuff without cutting anything, and I've never seen anything we're gonna cut. I'm not saying these aren't valuable at all. Some of them are. Some I really like a lot, but on the other hand, I like some of the stuff we cut too, and thought it was very valuable. So that's my issue. And I think even the row one, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't that just come to us about a week or 2 ago?
Very,
We're
quick
jumping into
turnaround,
that. We just heard about this 2 weeks ago.
So allocations, didn't they just come out for their summit
Right, I get that.
designation? So
Correct.
there's a short timeline, it's very specific in relation to how you can spend funds.
Correct.
Yes.
And are these push-in or pull-out services?
In terms of when they're working with the students, it probably would depend by level. But essentially, the nice part is the teams at the buildings will be able to kind of take that person in and have some of those discussions of what makes sense for their particular group of students and whether that support is better. I'd give the example at the elementary level, they had even talked about potentially using this person to support students in some of those unstructured times where the behaviors are popping up. as a mentor, as a support, as someone to provide feedback. So I think it could be either, but really a lot of the teams at the schools will be able to have conversations around the needs of the pocket of 25 to 32 students, because that caseload is very specific in numbers.
And then Dr. Johnson, if the board were to vote no in relation to this, then the schools would have to go back because of their summative designations and come up with a different plan and or allocate the money differently, correct?
Just out of curiosity, we just heard about this 2 weeks ago. What were they gonna do without it? I mean, they had to have, if they didn't, they should have had a plan for next year before 2 weeks ago.
They just got the allocation.
I know we just got the allocation, but what were we gonna do 3 weeks ago when we didn't even know about this?
I think this pocket of population is one we're not able to get to.
So we were just not gonna do anything.
Essentially, we'll rely on our normal practices, but in terms of this type of support with a one-on-one mentor, they wouldn't have received that. This is like that group of what you would call kind of your yellow students.
No, I get that, but even with I mean, we had the designation, we had the money to do it because we had the designation. I'm correct on that.
Yes.
So, not knowing 3 weeks ago, we had this opportunity from Roe. What were we gonna do next year? Nothing, even though we had the money? We weren't even gonna try, or?
Oh, for you mean specifically with these students or?
Yeah,
just
with the
in
students,
general?
yeah.
Well, with the students, it would be what our normal MTSS structure would
Right.
be. Right, it would be status quo, which is not someone that's able to spend that much time with them.
So we had, I think I'm getting this right, like $50,000 or close to that between the two schools, so we weren't gonna do anything with that money. We were just gonna say, forget it. Now that we got it, we got lucked into an opportunity, in theory, I'm just making it, and
Sure,
now we're gonna do it.
sure.
Where I'm just wondering why we didn't have a plan to do something about this, but, I get to doing this instead of what we were gonna do. But I would have hoped we'd have had a plan of what we were gonna do before we got this.
Sure, yes, no, I understand what you're asking now. So if the school, for example, has $40,000, typically we would never been able to have paid for an employee because that's right around even our starting salary. And then the way that the grants work is year one, you can pay 100% of the salary, but not moving forward. So that's why this one actually works well with that. No, the schools likely would have allocated it to continued professional development. All the schools have been doing professional development aligned to their summative designation. They've written in the past where they pay for stipends so staff can attend that professional development in the summer. They have written for materials and supplies to differentiate for those. Their current school improvement grant is written through this August. So we have allocated funds towards those things. This was the new pocket of money. So this was like an additional round. Dr. Carson, what else am I thinking of besides PD, stipends, materials?
Materials, yeah.
Materials and supplies.
But, I mean, they didn't know that there was a significant increase in their allocation, right, that we found out about like
Right, we
a month
also
ago.
found out
So
that
at Washington, it
ago.
went from $12,000.
It was like 9,000 to like 34.
Right, so some of this was money that we were just, was designated to us just a few weeks ago. I think that's what you were trying
Yeah.
to say.
Mhm.
So just so I have this correctly, the first year we are paying for this through grant money, or?
Yeah.
We are using grant money for all but 20,000 for these two positions.
Yeah, I think this makes tons of sense, especially since going forward, the position remains in the building at no cost to the district. Yeah,
And the positions have to be specifically allocated for your group for why you have a designation. So it
Right.
sounds as though what Dr. Johnson was saying, it would target those specific students, which is required in the grant.
And it's a designation and they now allow for newcomer. So if your designation was not EL and let's say it was special education, they can also use the money for
Nice.
newcomers, which was also a late addition this spring
Nice.
of an announcement.
See, I guess I'll be quit after this one. I guess I just look at it as we're spending $50,000, no matter whose money it is, it's still $50,000. And we know, we've had this for 2 or 3 weeks at the most. More like 2 weeks, but we'll give it 3. And we've already determined this is better than any alternative we could have done with that $50,000. That's my only complaint, is that I'm fine with doing this, that this was the best thing. We analyzed the problem, this was the best solution, but I don't know if we did that process. That's my only issue.
Did we do that process?
Yeah, so some of the schools are 3 years into some of this grant money, and as you know, with the grant funds, the rules are unbelievable with what you can and cannot spend on. And it's extremely difficult, and we have a lot of conversations with other schools of how are you spending this money? There's certain things that we think make sense, and our grant consultant will say, nope, can't spend on that. Which really limits us to a lot of professional development, which over the last 2 or 3 years, the schools have done a lot of. So we also have to watch that we're not asking teachers to spend their entire summer in professional development. So the grants are really challenging when it comes to spending money based off of the rules, and this one was an easy fit for once, to actually use the money to put an adult in the building versus more of what we've been trying to spend for the last 3 years.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera?
Aye.
Ms. Mayville?
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk?
Aye.
Mr. Booker?
Aye.
Mr. Zickert?
No.
Mrs. Whitcomb?
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner?
Aye. Motion passed, 6-1. Next on the agenda, we have the suspension report. Do I have a motion and a second to continue the suspension program for the next school year as presented? So moved.
Second.
Member Mayville made a motion and Member Herrera seconded the motion to approve to continue the use of the suspension program for next school year as presented. Discussion?
Is this the one that I've corrected, it's 5 kids at the ATC?
Correct.
Yeah, this was one that, in the policy, if there was anyone that probably got more eyebrows raised than any from the few people that were there, this was probably one of them. So, it was,
What was the feedback at policy?
they don't think that, a couple people, I don't wanna say, cause like I said, only a couple told me this, but there were only 5 there, 5 or 6, a couple online. I don't wanna discount Miss Taylor was online among others, but, that they're not convinced that for 5 kids, it's worth the $48,000, that it's a different setting where they're doing different things, then this thing could be just as easily accomplished in school as out of school, and that then you're segregating kids, because if, let's say you have 2 kids in a fight, you're obviously not gonna put both of them there, because that's the last thing you want, is probably both in the same space like that. So one's gonna get to go and one's not. How do you decide? I mean, it's just some of the logistics of it, among other things. That was the feedback.
Other discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Mayville?
Aye.
Mr. Herrera?
Aye.
Mr. Booker?
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb?
No.
Mr. Zickert?
No.
Mrs. Hauk?
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner?
Aye. I'm sorry, Mr. Booker, did you say, I'm just sorry, did you say aye?
I said aye.
I apologize. All right, motion passed, 6-2.
Couldn't be
5,
6.
I'm sorry. I added another board member. Okay, thank you, 5-2, thank you.
Math is hard.
Sorry, once I couldn't hear you, then I got thrown off, I apologize. All right, next on the agenda, we have the bilingual integration supervisor. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the addition of a bilingual integration supervisor as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the addition of the bilingual integration supervisor as presented. Discussion?
Yeah, again, on this one, I think we've done an internal review of the bilingual program. I said at the policy committee meeting, I've said before, is that recently, this year, not recently, but it's this year, I've heard more concerns about the bilingual program than I ever had before. I always viewed it as the crown jewel of the district, and You know, everybody wanted to come here for that, and parents wanted their kids in for that, and that still may be true to some extent, but maybe there's more, maybe they're just more vocal than they used to be, and it was always there, I don't know. But I do think, I just hate to add something without reviewing the program, especially from an outside eyes, that, like, we're gonna come up to the next one, outside eyes think we need something different that inside eyes didn't, and now we're gonna add something that we wouldn't have added before on the next one, based on an outside review or a different perspective review, that I think, in my opinion, we're jumping the gun on this one, because we're doing something before we've ever decided what we're gonna do with the whole program in totality, if it really is gonna be up for review.
It's a big ask. I mean, these qualifications, I get that, I mean, you know, it's gonna be, if we can find somebody who, it's a big ask, right? Experience in talent acquisition, culture and international education, strong visa and immigration process understanding, familiarity with, you know, laws and regulations, cultural norms. I mean, I don't know, I mean, we looking at hiring international teachers, which I think could have some real, you know, benefit. There's, you know, lots of school districts around that are looking at this and successfully doing it, and they're doing it with everything from soup to nuts, right? Bus drivers, you know, from Cambodia are being hired in large part in communities in Wisconsin, and they're finding it very successful and finding great employees. But there's a great deal of exposure to the district, you know, in the early stages of it. So, I mean, do we have good input from legal on all of the nuanced
So we are,
pieces of it, or?
and I'm sorry, were you?
No, that's,
Okay. I didn't want to interrupt you, Ms. Whitcomb. So we are actively and actually leading the area, I would say, in hiring international teachers across the district. Mr. Mandujano has actively recruited teachers for years, but more aggressively in these past few years as our needs have continued to increase. We did do this internal audit of the EL program needs and services and an external audit of special education, back to Mr. Zickert's point, very purposefully. We felt like we needed the special education external input and eyes at this point, because there had been a lot of revisions and changes to the program that had taken place internally already. But we knew that there was still some real concerns that we felt like we needed another voice to help us see. We believe, on the other hand, with the bilingual program, that there are some changes we can make and information we have right now internally to be able to make those programs. And this supervisor position, as Mr. Zickert very accurately stated, is going to be followed by a special education supervisor position. I will say, as many times as we are coming to this sort of crux, that I think the things that we're doing in special education, we need to mirror in EL. That the staffing is simply not reflective of the number of bilingual students that we are currently serving, and specifically Spanish-speaking students who are in our schools. 1 out of 4 students is Spanish-speaking and or bilingual and needing those supports. We aren't anywhere close to that in terms of the reflection of our staff, and we know the need is there. Mr. Mandujano has done an excellent job of working with his existing staff to incorporate our international teachers, but this is more than a job that he can do individually. I know he has relied upon the instructional coaches to support him. That means the instructional coaches aren't able to spend the time that they need to be spending in their classrooms. This, we really believe, is a change that we can make right now that will have impact in classrooms immediately. We still think an external audit might be appropriate, but again, we think we can make some changes right now that having an external auditor come in and tell us we need to do is not necessary. Once we've made those changes, then we think having somebody come in and tell us how to refine the program moving forward would make a ton of sense. So that is why we did it that way. Certainly, could we do it a different way? Absolutely. We believe this is, we started this study with a compelling why. We believe that this is a need that we have, and we believe we need to fill it sooner than later in order to start the school year in the best possible way. I know I've got some head nodding over here because we've got some people who sat in that program review, and just want to say that we really believe that this is an important step that has been delayed, needs to be addressed and not probably the only thing we will come forward with. So to Mr. Zickert's point, we are looking at the big picture as we continue to move forward with this recommendation.
My only disappointment on this was that when we looked at this stuff, and I'm not, like I said, there wasn't one person on the committee that didn't think these all had validity, standalone. They did not, I think everybody thought they had validity, all of them. The problem is, when we started cutting stuff a few months ago, it would have been nice to have seen this stuff then, that we're cutting this because we need to do this. We cut all kinds of stuff, and now all of a sudden, 5 months later, 4 months later, we're starting to add stuff that had nothing to do with the stuff we cut. If we're gonna look at a budget like that, it would be nice to say, we're cutting this, because I think this is I don't think there's anything necessary wrong with this at all, but we cut a lot of stuff I thought was good too, that it would have been nice saying, we're cutting this because we deem this more important than some of that stuff we got rid of. We never did that.
Time moves on. I mean, they just finished up with their review of the program, so it wasn't necessarily ready back when we had to make decisions about ESSER funding. I mean, I understand that it would be nice if we could stop time and evaluate all these budget items together so that we could, you know, place values on them all at the same time, but we just can't. You know, I know the committee worked really hard. They presented at the Ed Services Committee regarding the work that they did, and the input that they received from an awful lot of people in the district. Obviously our proportion of language learners has exponentially increased over time. I appreciate the internal review of the program to find those areas of low-hanging fruit that we can improve on, so that if we do decide a couple of years down the road, yes, we do want to pay for the big company to come in and take a look at our program, that we've done our best, at least internally, to identify areas where we can improve and rectify some of those problems in the meantime. So I'm in favor of this.
Not only has our student population that speaks Spanish or another language as their first language grown, but we also have to reflect on how many students are now enrolled in our dual language programs, our mono speakers also. So when you think EC through 12, it's doubled over the years now that we've rolled up through the high school level. So not just our ELs, although they have also increased. So Renee's job is not sustainable for one person, and I think right now a lot of this stuff either doesn't get done, or we're relying on union members or whomever else to support it. And I think for us to continue to be competitive, you need a person that can do recruitment. A lot of other districts have a recruitment team that's going internationally, and again, one person can't do that independently. So I'm glad to see this is being addressed, and I don't know that you need someone from the outside saying that.
I just think this is all stuff we should have, either we did know or should have known 5 months ago. I think the special ed one's a great example, because most of the stuff in that special ed report we talked about 2 years ago. There weren't any new things in that spec ed report that came up that we hadn't voiced concerns about 2 years ago. So it's fine. I mean, I think it's an interesting way of doing it, but that's what we're gonna do. That's what we're gonna do.
I think two things can be true at the same time, right? And I think two things are true here at the same time. That it would have been nice to have been able to have a bit more wide angle view of this, and maybe that's a good way to inform things going forward. Like, we can try to be a little further down the road with a number of things so that we are thinking, if this, then we can't do that, and this is a good thing to do. So, I think both of those things can be true at the same time, that the need exists, and that, perhaps, process can be, continued to be evaluated and looked at as, each new thing comes up and is, added into or disconnected from, the chain that is the budget.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
No.
Mr. Bucher.
No.
Mrs. Hauk.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 5-2. Next, we have the special education supervisor reorganization. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the special education supervisor reorganization as presented?
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion, Member Hauk seconded the motion to approve the special education supervisor reorganization as presented. Discussion?
Ms. Brenner, we do have Ms. Fabianchek and Ms. Zanako here. If the board was interested in hearing a little bit more regarding this recommendation.
I think, only because I encourage her to come. I don't want her to think we dragged her here for
Yeah.
nothing, especially when she's not working for the district
Yes.
yet. But I think it's very gracious of her to even come to the
Yes.
policy committee meeting, more or less come to this too.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Good evening. So one of the things we were able to do as a small leadership team is to review the audit, and that what I really appreciated about the audit is that they really took the time to align different components of the audit to the strategic plan. That was something I heard about before actually being hired, but didn't realize that they took such an excellent caution with looking at the long-term planning. So while the plan, the audit outlined numerous recommendations, some of those immediate ones were around the current leadership structure. Right now we know we have 2 supervisors, one is at elementary and early childhood level, and one at all of the secondary. So we are talking both middle schools, both high school, as well as our caseload for outplacement students, which we know is an extensive caseload that requires attending meetings outside of the district, placing students, and so on. Therefore, based on some of the recommendations, yes, we will continue to work through the long-term plan and provide continuous updates to the board of what that's going to look like with some of the additional recommendations. But that immediate need for adding a supervisor so that specifically for our secondary caseload, we can split that between 2 people. So one being for middle school and having the role of an outplacement supervisor. That's a very full role as it is, and then having a supervisor for the high school. What that would also allow to do is to address some of the bigger long-term components to build capacity and provide direct support at the building level to our LEAs. I had the pleasure of visiting all of the elementary sites already. And one common theme, I have to say, is there are sometimes multiple transition meetings. It's not just necessarily one IT meeting per year, and being able to provide that support, direct support to building administrators, and build capacity in teams and discuss professional development and our communication plan. We really need that third position, and that was our recommendation. The audit also suggested looking at the job description, and we did just that. So the drafted job descriptions outline that, and what you will see in addition to that direct support to serve as an LEA, which as we know it's a collaborative process with building administration. It also talked about professional development, building capacity, and our long-term plan for the department. Questions on that?
How does this fundamentally, I don't know who to look at, fundamentally change, or does it change in any way the job descriptions or tasks and responsibilities of the 2 current supervisors in on the team?
It added the component of participating in professional development. It added the component of more direct and I would say frequent support as LEA. So being able to be there Right now, with the two administrators, it's really hard to provide the support. It added at the elementary level, the component of transition from early childhood to kindergarten, and then for the other two job descriptions, so there's additional transitions. So from elementary going to middle school, and then middle school to high school, which we know our students require to also have their own transition plans. So that's additional work to be done, and then providing training. So those were the components. Looking closer at instruction, and something that was added, I was also helping, supporting building level administrators with evaluation of special education staff. And that would be a collaborative process, so whether it's going to be an informal or formal observation, that would be agreed upon with the administrators. So we have specialized programs related service providers, but also special education teachers that are case managers for some of our self-contained programs, again, supporting building administration in the evaluation processes, and having that special education background knowledge to support that. So that was across all three job descriptions.
So potentially, which position would be the vacancy? Has that been determined as of yet?
It has not been determined as of yet which position would be the vacancy, is my understanding at this time, although I am not sure.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine.
At this time, I do not know the answer to
Thank
that
you.
question.
Thank you.
Maybe in July 1st she'll be, I mean, she's still working, I mean, it's
No,
nice
that's
she came.
fair. I'm just
It's
asking.
nice she came tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you
But
again
I
for
do,
coming.
one last question for me is that, is this gonna help? Because I think one of the big things, the obstacles we have in spec ed is the communication part that teachers need to, whether it be professional development or whatever, why these kids are staffed the way they are, why the outcomes are the way they are, why we can do some things and can't do others. Why can't we do this instead of that? I think those are all front burner things. Would this essentially help in that too?
Absolutely, and that leadership structure would also allow for talking about different improvements in terms of professional development and embedded job training. So for example, working with teams, IEP teams at the building level with the pre-referral process, the data collection that is, we know all these decisions are based on student data, students who are not making progress. So supporting the instructional pieces, supporting the instruction of current interventions that are being provided and student growth over time as well. And the communication plan, the goal, we had the ability to meet with both supervisors this past Friday and already set up a planning meeting that would address new teacher orientation, some of the legal training, compliance pieces, and how we would go about that. And the goal would be to also update the board with next steps. But having a larger team would allow us to do that planning and have more frequent communication and different ways to reach all of our staff.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk.
Aye.
Ms. Mando.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Zicker.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 7-0. Next on the agenda, we have possible action to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for 9-month administrator, Belvedere North High School Dean. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for 9-month administrator, Belvedere North High School Dean as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Member Houck made a motion and Member Herrera seconded the motion to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for 9-month dean at Belvedere North High School for Alexander Lawrence in the amount of $73,500 effective July 1st, 2024 as presented. Discussion?
Yes, he is here this evening, yes.
Welcome. Hi.
Welcome, Alexander. Well, we'll wait till the vote is
Okay.
complete.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call please.
Mrs. Howe.
Aye.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Zicker.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye, motion passed 7-0.
You're official. Welcome. Anything you wanted to say?
I just want to say thank you to everyone for this opportunity. I can't wait to be a part of the Belvedere North team. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Welcome.
Welcome.
We're excited to have you here.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have superintendent's contract extension. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the superintendent's contract extension?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Houck seconded the motion to approve the superintendent's contract extension. Discussion?
Yeah, among other reasons, like I stated before, I don't agree with having a contract long enough where a majority of the board's gonna be elected in about 8 or 9 months, and they'll have their whole term without being able to do anything one way or the other on a contract for the superintendent. Philosophically, I just think it's wrong. Thought it was wrong the last time, but and I've talked to Dr. Shug before about aspects of other things, so that's it.
Any further
I
discussion?
feel like you made a commitment to us. We asked you to move here. You know, you're selling your home in the town you lived in for years and years, and I want us to make a commitment to you. I think you've done a great job, and you deserve it.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Howe.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
No.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
No.
Mr. Zicker.
No.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye, motion passed 4-3. The following items have been added for discussion or will be coming up for further review and/or possible action in the future. Background information has been provided and the board may ask questions and/or request clarification at this time.
Do you want me to
You go.
speak a little bit
Yeah.
about that? All right, so we have the board meeting scenarios that are updated there in your board docs. And basically what this is doing, I think, yeah, you gotta turn it there, thank you, Ms. Hadley. Is just giving you an idea of what possible scenarios we could look at moving forward. I'm gonna walk very briefly through these and then give you a chance to ask questions. My hope is that this will give you a little bit of information so that you can share with me what it is you're interested in discussing at a special board meeting in July. And I'm also hoping we can set a special board meeting date for July. But I will start by just sort of walking you through this document. And I've got Mr. Winters and Mr. Nelson here who are gonna help us as necessary or as needed. So the first scenario that you're looking at is our current conditions. I know we've debated the use of the salsa chart term, but that has been what we've been using, so for consistency, that's what it currently looks like in the district. If you move to the second slide, this gets us to tier 1, which is the baseline, okay, and you can see the colors on the salsa chart have changed there because what has happened here is that the facilities assessment recommendations have been made. So if we simply make the recommendations out of the facility needs assessment, that's the $110 million over 10 years, and the SALSA chart would change considerably. And you can also see the numbers on there indicate it went from what color to what color. How many steps along that SALSA chart were made based as a result of what happened in the facilities assessment, okay? If you then move to the next slide, which is the tier 2, this is the enhanced status quo. And again, you can see this also chart continues to get a little bit more green, a little bit less orange. And here you're looking at everything in tier 1, okay? And then also some of these other items that are listed there in the scope. This looks like expanding pre-K in the current situation. Looks like the sale of Kishwaukee, looks like renovating Everest, looks like private restrooms at the middle and high schools, and collaborative spaces at the middle and high schools. And again, just to be absolutely clear, we would make all these individual decisions as we go through. This is just to give you an idea of what that might look like and then what the spend on that would be. Now you can see we're at $165 million over that 10 years. And then if you look to tier 3, you'll see a pretty big jump here as we get to tier 3. This is really where we're getting to a point where we're meeting the vision. And you also see a pretty big jump in the spend there at now $232 million. This one is looking at Everest expanding into their entire space, the relocation of the clinic, a new early childhood center, and really meeting the vision in all of those schools. So, you know, collaborative spaces in all the schools, for example. And again, important to note that we would pick and choose along the way what exactly that looked like. And then the 4th tier is meeting the vision. And at our last meeting, there was conversation about a new Perry, perhaps rebuilding Perry on its site, at a new site, making a Perry/early childhood center. If that were something to explore, that would bring our cost up to the $247 million you see there over the 10 years. And again, you can see the full scope there. And again, there's lots of ways that we can sort of work through that. The architects have prepared some options that we can look at in terms of what a new Perry might look like if it were on the existing site, or what it might look like if we put it someplace else that would be still in that Perry neighborhood. So lots of different ideas there to discuss. Tonight, I'm just looking for, what do you need? What do you need at a next meeting to sort of help you give us some additional feedback on how we might continue to move forward with this process, and what questions you might have. But not too deep on the questions, because we're gonna go do that at the special board meeting when we have all that information for you too.
The two things that stuck out to me,
Yeah.
obviously, were the 110 million to 250 million,
Yep.
which is probably be all the bonds we've given in who knows how many years, more years than I've been in Belvedere, all put together. The other thing is, from what I remember is, when we got the facilities plan, one of the urgencies was Perry.
Yep.
We had to hurry up and make a decision on
Yep.
Perry, way fast, went quicker than I thought it should have, as I said before, but now that we've decided 6-1, what are we gonna do with Perry? That's what I wanna know, is that now we're there, that should be the priority. If that was the first thing we had to do before, we've done it, we've given the answer, now I wanna know what we're gonna do with it.
Okay.
And how we're gonna do it.
And I think the idea with, we had to decide on Perry first was not because we had to then immediately implement those changes at Perry. It was, we're not going to spend the facilities money on Perry if we're going to close Perry. So it's hard to allocate dollars when we don't know if that building's staying open or not. I think now, to your earlier point, we need to, now that we know Perry is sticking around in some form or another, we can look at all the options, all the other things that we may or may not want to spend money on, and make a decision on those things sort of all together globally, because we may all want an early childhood center, but because we all also want X, Y, and Z, the early childhood center might fall to 5th on our need/want list. So I think now that we've made the decision on Perry, and I disagree that that happened too quickly. I think we needed to make a decision on that, and I'm glad we did in the amount of time we had. Now we can, since that is a priority to keep Perry in some respect, now we can see where that fits in on all the things that we absolutely need to do, which is pretty much the $110 million, I think, and then decide where it falls in on our wants.
So the numbers here, those would be in addition to what we saw previously for Perry, correct? Or this is including?
In addition to what we saw previous, so these are cumulative dollars that you're seeing here. So they're all cumulative spends.
Inclusive of the Perry renovation?
Correct. Well, so, but it depends on what you're gonna do. So if, for example, you're doing a new Perry,
Obviously,
it looks
that's
a little bit
I
different.
get it.
But important to recognize that, which I didn't recognize when we started this process, is I thought restrooms cost this much money, right? So that's how much the restrooms are gonna cost. But it's not calculated like that at this point. These are very broad numbers, so it's really just calculated on square footage. Correct? And so we don't know yet exactly what those impacts are gonna be. That's what makes these averages. But the new Perry is gonna look like a very different spend than renovating Perry. And again, that's sort of where the architects had that conversation. If we're gonna invest that kind of money, do we really invest and make it, you know, a new site essentially that gets rid of some of the problems that we currently have?
I agree with Matt, like, I need to know more about Perry specifics, the process, the cost, because I feel like, just like your personal banking account, like I've said several times, I know Dr. Shug and other board members, like, I can't make any other determinations until I really know where that sits. I also feel strongly like we gotta keep an eye on what's happening with Kishwaukee also, so that doesn't continue to be a larger cost or continue to deteriorate, et cetera.
Yeah, like I said, even the thing with Kishwaukee, it'd be nice to know, I've asked this before, we're losing money every year, aren't we? I mean, I've never gotten an answer to that yet, that would be nice to know. I mean, whether it's costing us money to keep it open or it's not. The other thing with Perry though is I think when we had all that deferred maintenance and stuff, I think that's why there's some urgency there, is that we sold closing it, or we made the argument to close it based on all the deficiencies it has. Yet, I don't want it to be a long time that those kids have to go to something that we thought was reasonably all right to bring to the board to close, and now we're gonna slow walk what we're gonna do with it for those kids there, because we're trying to look, and I agree, we need to look at the big picture. 100% agree with that. I'm glad Ms. Mayville thinks that's true too. I 100% agree with that. But I also think that in the short term, we deferred a lot of that stuff for a lot of years. My guess is because, as Ms. Mayville alluded to one time before, there's probably some notion about where you're thinking about closing it. But now we don't want, now that we're not, what are we gonna do in the short term and the long, I guess short term versus long term.
And I think we need to figure out if we're closing the building to build a new building, you know, the board voted not to close Perry School, but there was considerable discussion. I'm not sure that there were, of those 6 people, the 6 necessarily had a consensus on what that looked like. So I do think that's important going forward, and as the one, I also have opinions on that now that that's the will of the board to move forward on. So I do think that that's important to do before we start putting a lot of money in that building to decide if that building's going to stay.
So Dr. Shug, so things that we could use for the special board meeting is costs of a brand new replacement for Perry, the cost for the possible addition to Perry, so the breakdown, the differences between there. Also possible land acquisition costs for possible new Perry at a new site. And then, I don't know if there's any other scenarios for that we would look at, but that would be some helpful information that we could evaluate at the special board meeting. And, you know, I'm sure we're gonna hear different scenarios, the pros and cons of both, in addition to the permanent, the current building, and of course, an all-out replacement. So if we can see the differences on both of those, that would be helpful in terms of cost and pluses and minuses on those.
That's all very helpful.
So I have a question about, or would like additional information on, slide 2, or page 2 of the slides, baseline, learning environment tier 1. We pull back in 2.5 million district office and operation buildings updates, I'm sorry. I'd wanna know what those are, what's proposed there. I know we're not calling it a welcome center anymore, but what's being proposed under those, that $2.5 million update. And then, I appreciate the clarity on the square footage as it relates to cost per square foot, kind of being the bucketed number for, the different enhancements is based on square foot. And it's good that we're getting some general numbers here per building. I guess I would also like to, and this, it's not a crystal ball, right? I know we don't have a crystal ball. But if we can look at the things that we think are most likely to increase or spike in cost on the front end of these things, and again, we don't know, right? Like, from an insurance perspective, I every day deal with, TIVs and estimated values for buildings, and they're always, giving a valuation based upon what they think it will cost to rebuild it. But we do know sometimes that this particular industry is pacing quickly in the increase in costs, whereas another industry may be, pacing slower. And so if there's a way for us to have some general sense of, would there be a cost advantage to, for example, doing all the bathrooms in every building while we can get, plumbing at a lesser, just having some predictive.
Yeah, that's great.
Based on information that's, obviously currently available. Certain industries are, every industry is increasing in cost every day, right? But some are increasing even more accelerated than others. And then, because it's going to come into play at some point in time, and understanding this is a broader picture, getting some real concrete ideas about what early childhood, absent the new building. Because eventually they're gonna tell us, here's what it would look like, here's what the cost would be if we built some version of a new early childhood building, whether it was in tandem with Perry or some other scenario. But what costs are there in the short term if we don't go that route? And are those costs worth it if we think in the short, what could we do at a minimum in the short term if we believed we wanted to hold place for the possibility of a building at some point in the 10-year, right? We don't wanna do all these, incur several $1 million worth of costs to existing programs and then turn around and say, oh, well, now we're still gonna build a new building. So what are the most effective and cost-effective things we could do temporarily if we did wanna hold space for the possible addition of an early childhood center at some point in time? And if we said, nope, eventually we end up on saying, no, we don't think that is in the 10-year plan, then what is the more robust version of the kinds of enhancements and improvements that would need to be made to the buildings that currently house and or that might future house the early childhood program? Would be things, I guess I have questions
Great,
about.
that's great feedback. All of that is great. Thank you.
Sorry, did you
Oh,
have one?
no, I thought Tom was gonna say something.
I was just gonna ask, I know they can't give us exact dollars, but there has to be an algorithm that tells what percentages are we allotting for visual spatial versus this and versus that when you put together these numbers, because these are massive numbers. Isn't there some indicator
That's a good point.
that you can give us as to where you come up with these dollars?
I couldn't hear your question, so.
There has to be some algorithm that you use to determine, because these are massive dollars, how you dedicate, X dollars to this or X dollars to that. How do you come up with those dollars?
Two ways. One, there are mean standards that come out every year that go by region and type of work and all that goes. There's a number of factors. You can go look at that. And then there's multipliers up or down depending on how close you are to Chicago, how close you are to Peoria, Madison, the type of work being done. You take that and you then compare that against recent bids we've had on projects. Boy, masonry was really up for the last 3 projects. Or
copper's really high, so plumbing is really high right now. Or precast has such a long lead time, they can charge whatever they want, you know, they're jacking their prices up or coming down. So you look at what current bids are in the last, say, 12 to 18 months, and you try to take those two numbers and figure out where you're at square footage wise on the type of work that you're doing.
So if I'm understanding, I think Tom's question
We don't have
is,
an algorithm.
yeah, if you
What
took
I'm saying-
the,
I'm saying
from the, yeah,
in like engaging spaces, we had our spec ed study done and they said they thought our spaces were really good. Maybe we don't need to focus as big a percentage on that as what you're saying. But we don't have an indicator of what really is being dedicated in each category.
So when you go into the concept of what you want to do, which is not master plan, but actual pre-design, schematic design, then you can decide what level you want to be, if you're going to do that. We can say, this is what your space would be like if you were spending $45 a square foot versus $145 a square foot. Whether that's a STEM lab, or whether that's just, hey, we're just gonna cosmetically make this space larger, provide new finishes, provide new furniture, whatever it might be, that's gonna be your lower end. If you're gonna convert it into engaging space that's at the higher level of things, that's gonna be $100, $150, $175 a square foot, that'll factor into the type of equipment, type of technology. Does the whole room need to be rewired for something? Some of those spaces are engaging because of the components that are in the space, whether they're acoustical, lighting, movable cabinetry, all those types of things. Those factor into a level. So we can give you a breakdown on that. Once you know, hey, we want to move forward with something like this, what's our spectrum of choices compared to where we are at our baseline right now?
so for example, just take tier 3, and I'm gonna just pick BNHS, 27.4 million. At some point, not today, but at some point, we would know of that 27.4 million, approximately this percentage of it would be going toward baseline based on the scenario we wanna go forward with. This percentage would be going toward visual spatial, this percentage of that budget, based upon the choices that are made. At that point, then it'll factor out to which went to vision, which went to spatial, and which went to,
Right, as you.
once factual decisions are made about it.
As you move forward on that process, the more information that we have from you, the more we can hone in on breaking that out for you based on the direction you wanna go, or not go, and say, hey, the minimum in this, to do this is gonna be $30 million, and you say, that's not something we're willing to spend right now, then we don't spend any more time on that. We go in another direction and say, here's what you wanna focus on, here's what that's going to cost, and here's the breakdown for that.
And I think that would be great for them, at least to start the discussion on that, is that when we look at this, like the facilities plan in general, when we look at that, now that Perry it's gonna be something, how are we progressively gonna build up? I mean, whether it be from the 0 to 110, whether it be the 110 to the 250, 257 or whatever, do we anticipate this being the first 5 years, this being year 5 to 10, this being first phase, second phase, third phase? We don't know any of that right now. And I think that would be very appropriate, because I think that way the board would at least be involved, I hope, in setting their priorities for what the vision is on what the board prioritizes. A should come before B, B before C, and so on. So we don't look at it as a totality of a package and argue about components of it.
Right.
You know, because that just, in my opinion, that'll waste time.
Right, I think, I don't wanna put words in anybody's mouth, but the way I would approach it is exactly that. I think you need to look at the master plan is 30,000 foot view. You need to look at the big picture and say, here are the things that we support, and here's how we prioritize them. And then, once you've got that, then you can say, well, for example, let's just say facility assessment, that's our number. We're gonna do X amount minus any of those dollars that would be different if we do these 5 things for the master plan. So then we can go in, because it's all broken out in the assessment, we can go in and say, okay, well, you're not gonna need to do this, you're not gonna need to do that, you're not gonna need that. So that 110 goes to 92, whatever that number becomes. That master plan components then, let's say it's secure entrances, just for the sake of discussion.
Right.
Secure entrances, early childhood, doing more to Perry than just putting the Band-Aids on to fix the issue, but actually make it a better school, physically. Not talking about how they deliver education, just physically. whether that's new structure or doing significant renovations that's not just slapping an elevator on one side or the other. And a certain level of collaborative spaces, whatever that might be. Maybe that's some STEM at the high school or middle school, and maybe that's just collaborative spaces at the elementaries. And we look at all of that, and that's, you know, that adds up to $180 million. You need to prioritize what those are, and we need to talk through that with you as far as, for example, one of the things that comes to my mind is if you ultimately do support an early childhood central location, I would argue it would be smarter to do it sooner, because one, it will cost less to do, and it will free up space in the rest of your buildings, so that if you do approach Perry and you're going to do significant renovations to it rather than build a new school, they'll need to go somewhere while that happens. So that frees up space for you to be able to do that without buying mobiles or creating overcrowding and thinking about that long term. So that's something that comes to my mind as how you would approach that. If it's something you support. If it's not something that, hey, you know, we're just not gonna do that right now, then we need to look at what are the alternatives to that. But that kind of bigger, coming down from 30,000 to 15,000 view, to kind of get an idea of where those priorities lie, and then we can start to break out those costs going forward and actually start doing some preliminary programming and design on what those are based on the board's priorities. Because it's all just data and information that we've given you right now. So it's how you want to mix and match that. And even though there's 4 scenarios here, you don't have to pick scenario 2, scenario 4. You can say we want to do everything in scenario 1, which is basically the baseline, and then we like this from scenario 2 and this from scenario 3. How do we make those work together without duplicating services or costing us more money? So you can pick and choose those pieces. There are a few that are interconnected. You got to do one, do the other, but most of them you should be able to pull and push and say these were our priorities. So we come up with hybrid concept 5, and that's what the district moves forward with.
One thing I think I would like some information on, for me, expanding Everest is a priority. I'd like to expand it into the entire building, and I know we had the option that we had talked about for doing that was adding the clinic onto central office. I guess I would like to see if there are any other options, any other space the clinic could occupy that perhaps would be less expensive than a new build at central office, or maybe, I know sometimes going in and completely renovating a space is as expensive almost as new construction, but if there are options for moving that clinic space other than new construction at CO, I would like to see that.
I agree. I mean, I know they have a clinic. I mean, I know they have a clinic at Auburn. That's what
And
they're
I said
saying.
it before, it even doesn't have to be on school grounds, it can be anywhere, right?
It could.
But I would
That's what
assume
they
we
can
have space
explore.
at a high school.
I mean,
to have-
north.
But it would make more sense. I mean, you could do it in a high school too. Where
Yeah,
you got
there's
all
space.
I mean, they'd all work. But I think those are good concepts to at least explore.
I'd like to know about the projected enrollment and staffing for next year at Perry, because as I've said before, if we're gonna prioritize funding and money there, I'd like to see what potential offerings we have to let other children attend, should they choose to do so.
That's a good list. That's
Send a
lots of
homework for
stuff. We should be able to find just some stuff for the meeting. Matt, were you gonna say something else?
No, I just said it was a long one.
It really is quite literally a long list.
So we're looking at
We-
dates in July?
Well, so I wanted to sort of preface this that we have, yes, is gonna be the answer to that, but if you have looked at administrative reports, you see we have our new board meeting dates in there. And we have scheduled 2 board meetings a month so that we could potentially have expulsion hearings on the first Monday of the month, should we need them. But we could also cancel those. And then we also have that the third Monday of the month. So that is something that we scheduled out for right now. And again, we can talk about that. I talked about that with Ms. Brenner and Ms. Hauk, and that's sort of how we thought we could lay this out for right now. I say that to say that Monday, July 1st would hypothetically be our first board meeting. However, we are not likely to have any expulsions to hold on Monday, July 1st, and it's a pretty quick turnaround for a holiday weekend. I'm thinking July 8th, however, might be a good date. So I'm thinking right now, even though in your admin reports it says July 1st could be a board meeting, that we would cancel that and we would instead do July 8th as a special board meeting to discuss all of these pieces. Is there any possible way that that works for all of the board members?
Yes.
Yep.
I think it does as of right now.
Yeah, I can do the 8th, I can't do the 1st. I
Come
can
on,
do the
Lisa.
8th.
I know, I'm looking sorry.
But moving forward, I can't do the
I'm
first
gonna
Monday of every
guess
month.
probably
Okay. Oh,
only if I make my husband very mad and come back
Fire
early from
department,
vacation.
that's their meetings for fire. department, same day.
But it might work. I mean, it's less, the first would be an absolute no. So if we do the,
so it's better than the 1st.
yeah,
I could do the 8th.
All right,
Better than
so
the
we'll tentatively say July 8th, and then Lisa, you and I can follow up maybe a little bit further and see if we need
Yeah,
to throw
well,
another
and-
date out there.
yeah.
I mean, ideally,
it
I'd
is
like to
what
have
it is.
everybody here. I think it's important, but obviously, July is never gonna be easy. So, all right, we will plan on July 8th. I will work with the team to put together an agenda that will address some of these pieces. I will put everything in writing so that you have all that, and whatever I missed, you can let me know so that we can get that filled in. And I think that'll get us a lot closer to where we need to be, so.
And then I would like on that agenda also, I had talked about the possibility of a committee of the whole to talk about facilities going forward, so maybe we could put that on the agenda as well.
We can absolutely put that on the agenda as well. All right, very good. Anything else for that meeting? All right. Steve and Sean, you took notes as well, yes?
What's that?
I don't feel super confident now, but thank you. Luckily, we have the meeting recorded as well. Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda, we have EL review programs.
Yes, we do, and we have Mr. Mandujano and Mr. Mandera here. And we do have members, as I mentioned earlier, of our committee that did the EL review of programs. And you have that information here. It was presented out at Ed Services. I think we're gonna do a brief present out of some of those key pieces tonight, and then open it up for board discussion and feedback.
Good evening, everybody. All right, so we are going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the program review that we did this year at secondary, and then some follow-up to an elementary review that was done back in, I believe it was 21-22 school year, that we kind of put a pause last school year, and so forth. So first thing that we wanted to do and let you guys know is kind of our focus area that we went off of our strategic plan that we had. So some of the things that we were looking at for our focus is looking there at goal 1, goal 2, and then also goal 3, which we really mainly focused a lot on goal 1. So basically starting, goal, and our main focus here was goal 1. So basically back in February, we came back to review as one of our focus areas that was determined back in 21-22, and which was to look at the math instruction that we currently do at our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So back when we did our first elementary program review, one of the things that we were talking about and looking at is the discrepancies that we were seeing as far as our scores within our math instruction, and then our math scores that we were seeing. Normally, our program for 3, 4, 5, well, in K1-2, what we do is we start out teaching math and English. 3, 4, 5, then we teach math and Spanish, and then 6th grade all the way through, through they graduate, math is done in English. So we wanted to kind of like take a look at that and kind of give math more consistency with our instruction and as well as vocabulary. Giving this, all of our students that participate in our program equal opportunity then to also be able to enroll in some of our upper courses in math and so forth. The other thing that we were looking at is increases the emphasis of language arts and then science and social studies in Spanish. So currently, what we do is at K-1-2, the primary language that we do for literacy is Spanish. So it's about 60 minutes with a 30-minute English block or English maintenance. And then at 3-4-5 it flips. So the amount of Spanish language instruction that our students receive then flips down to 30, and we increase our English. So we were looking at that, and then also at when they get to middle school, they continue on with English, in Spanish for social studies, and then also when they get to high school, in our dual classes, our science and social studies are also taught in Spanish. So kind of giving some consistency, some continuation with that as well, and then lessen some of the math anxiety for our students with some of the concepts and instruction. Again, as I mentioned before, we start out in one language, we then flip to a second, and then go back to English. So kind of giving that consistency, and we'll talk a little bit about how we are seeing some heartaches, if you will, within our math instruction. So basically what we are seeing with our kids is, yes, they are starting to get the language, they're starting to learn the language, the vocabulary in English, and then once they get to third grade, when it's that testing time, well, we flip the language of instruction, right? So the expectation is that, yep, the kids are gonna master it right away, and that's that first year that they take IER, right? So we start seeing our scores kind of increase, if you will. Then once we have those state scores that really matter, we see a dip. And then they start growing, 4th grade, 5th grade, right, because they're having that consistency language. Then 6th grade, a dip again. And so therefore, one of the things that we've talked about is, okay, how do we maintain that consistency for our students? So within that, the committee did do a recommendation here, and that is to kind of change the model or the language of instruction for some of our focus areas or our core subjects. So one of the things that we had said is, well, we need to kind of look at a way where our English can stay consistent. So we went ahead and looked at different models, and also then looked at some research that was done, and kind of take a look at some of the schedulings that they were recommending and so forth. So one of the things that we had noticed and we saw across some of the districts around us, and then also some of the recommendations, was to consistently keep math one language. So as part of the recommendations that the committee has wanted to do and wants to make, is to go ahead and follow that model. Now, we know that it's very difficult to make a change 3, 4, 5 right away, change all 3 grade levels. So we wanted to do a slow roll up starting this fall with 3rd grade. So 3rd grade, switch the model for 3rd grade so that they start teaching math in English with a continuation of 60 minutes of English language arts. And at the same time, the other thing that we hear is for Spanish language arts, we see that at the middle school level, the teachers are saying, well, they come to us not at a level that we are expecting. They're losing it, which makes sense, as we're giving them 60 minutes and then we're bringing it back down to 30. So continuing it, and with that as well is continue to keep that Spanish language arts at a 60-60. So students would receive a full 120 minutes of language arts, 60 English, 60 Spanish. But then if you look at that time allocation piece, then that means we need to make another shift, and that would be with science and social studies. So our thought here is to have science and social studies stay consistent and as being taught in Spanish at 3, 4, 5. So then that way, when they get to middle school, we start kind of continuing with that consistency, and then in high school, it kind of helps with some of that vocabulary and helps the teachers stop, or so that they don't have to reteach vocabulary and so forth. Bring back some of those foundations there for students. So that was one of the recommendations the committee made, is to do that, is to start out for the next school year, 3rd grade, to start having this change. And then the year after that, move up to 4th, and the year then after that would be 5th grade, and then continuing on. So that is one of the things that the committee had recommended. And then to monitor this first cohort, or this first 3rd grade, to kind of look at how they are doing within their math within over the next 3 years, right? If this change that we are making is actually moving in a positive direction. And then part of the things that we would continue to use is obviously our map data to kind of keep an eye on that growth track, right? Are they making that growth that we are expecting to see, right, with the continuation of being taught in the same language? And then taking that, what we have, and then establishing a rate of improvement, you know, once they do IAR, right? And then also after that is when we're doing that, then create that baseline, right? We obviously, as you guys all know with data, we want to create a baseline to see where we're at and then be able to compare. Yes, okay, are we making growth, are we making progress, or are we staying stagnant, or are we decreasing, right? So have that with this cohort, this group that would be coming in, using that baseline to determine, okay, are we seeing significantly growth or not? And then also, again, continuing then based on that, off of that data that we see, continuing to evaluate then the impact of the model of instruction, which would then basically, again, we want to wait, you know, a few years for that, and basically back in 27, 28 is going back and looking at those numbers, looking at that data to see if we make an impact or not, or how big or how small or what.
So thanks, Renee. So as Renee talked with the program model in the way of the elementary part of it, looking at first, just to kind of tie into things into the secondary part of it, the committee was very influential and did a lot of work in the way how that kind of looked and developed that math component for that program to actually have an instructional change done with there. As you can see, we set up times to kind of reevaluate that and see how that progress is going to be looking. As we go into the secondary program review, we want to establish that strong foundation, also looking at the instructional components, but there are some other things that we need to look in within that whole program of our secondary level. As you can kind of see within the presentation itself, it kind of came up with a mission of really what we're looking at is really threefold. One, really kind of creating some consistent learning opportunities for our students 6 through 12 in a dual language or bilingual sense of what we're offering for our programs. The second one is to really have a strong sense of dual language leadership done at the building level, whether it's a principal or other people that might be involved in that. And then the third point of that is to really create, and this is really a caveat of a strong part of the program, having consistent instructional methods that are done within common structure of bilingual education for our secondary level moving forward. And that is happening with our elementary as they move forward. We want to continue that with our secondary then too, 6 through 12. This is something that Renee and I had started really with our administrators, really kind of get a timeline of how everything worked. What were their needs? What were they seeing in their building over a course of period of time? Not just this year, but really what they've seen over the course of the last 2 to 3 years. And then as we map things out, we kind of developed different timelines of how we were going to address that with different groups. So we did that, we addressed it with the staff, we met with the departments in every secondary building, we got their feedback, got some discussion, kind of then formulated some responses of what we want to do, but we wanted to do more. So we went back into the classrooms and really kind of see what are the things that are happening with students in those classrooms. What is happening in the way of personnel in those classrooms. So then we took that data, compiled that to a point, then we got to April and May and we met with the stakeholder group. So we compiled the data, shared it with the stakeholder group, and when you do have a stakeholder group, there's a lot of things that came up with it. But as we kind of go through the rest of the plan that you would see in more detail, when you do open up the link that kind of outlines more things, you will see a lot of things that we have kind of started to things where we want to forecast into the future. So the most immediate things that we've already started working on, thanks in part to a lot of the work that's already been done in the way of our newcomer program. So we've already kind of laid that foundation knowing that was an immediate need. That is something that has been addressed right away in the beginning with our administrators and also with our teachers. And you can see it within the community and actually the society structures of how, what do we do with when you have immigrant students move into your community in mass number. And we didn't want to be behind the 8 ball at all, so I'm glad we're moving forward with that part. That was an immediate goal that we had moving up for this school year. Other parts of it then too is really just like, what does it look like in the secondary bilingual program? we really need to develop some future goals and how this kind of looks. So one of the big emphasis that you want to see started next year is really that whole development of that common language. What Renee and I kind of attributed to is like a handbook. You want to have something that everyone has some common things that they all can kind of use as a program guide of what that looks like for bilingual education at a secondary level, and start that development next year. The other part of it, as actually was talked about tonight, is that as Renee has gone through the position and kind of evolving how this has worked, and due to his great work that he's done from getting for his student teachers coming in internationally, that takes a lot of actual work, not just for him, but we found it also took a lot of work for instructional coaches and staffing to kind of do too. So the immediate need that we need to have right away is somebody to kind of assist in that whole transition part of that cultural need that our international teachers need to have right away. The residency, the housing, the food, the basic needs that we need to have for our staff to be successful to teach our students in classrooms. As well as kind of continuing that research level, as Renee had said with other districts, but really continuing that part moving forward here on out to make sure that we're building the best program that we have for our district. And one of the areas that we want to make sure that we continually want to keep better at, and you'll see this kind of go into more of the next part of the goals and was mid-range ones, is really what do we do in the way of that professional development with our current staff, getting them that ESL or that EL endorsement. Because as we know, we're going to have more students coming in that we need to make sure that they are getting the best education they can in a bilingual type of format. So as we go into mid-range goals and we look into the big picture, you can see it in the program review a little bit more of how that looks like in staffing, but that definitely expands the staffing, the leadership, and the growth of what that program is going to look like at the secondary level. Really to assist not in the teacher level, to also the administrative level, to also the parent level of resources. So you can kind of see what a forecast of what it looks like for staffing allocation is in the plan itself. We also need to continue to keep looking at what that is going to look like in a way of resources. It's really taxing right now for Renee being one person to kind of map out what curriculum resources is going to look like over a longer term. When we do have Dr. Vallant, who is a great curriculum director, it's hard to address the needs of subgroups when you have something with a specialized population of bilingual format that you need to get something that's going to work best for them. We're doing that with our newcomers, with our teachers kind of working through the curriculum part of it, but we need to look at it as a bigger scale. So that is the part of the things that you would see kind of developing more within those mid-range goals. And then to finalize things in the way of the long-range goals and beyond, as Renee had mentioned before, really what we're kind of looking at is really kind of being more continuity within the programs. It's just a bilingual program. It's not dual language, it's not monolanguage, it's just bilingual programming of what we're doing. And then really getting more teachers involved in the way of getting that endorsement, whether they're especially those monolingual teachers, because we're not going to get all the teachers coming in, from international. We need to make sure that we're growing our own. So we have opportunities that we're building now to plan for the future through partnerships we have with Rockford University, Grand Canyon University, NIU, ISU, those type of partnerships to get our teachers those opportunities to have those endorsements later on down the road when we get to 27, 28 and beyond. And then to summarize everything in the end, we're doing great things. We're doing good things, but we need to get better at some things too. And one of the bigger things that we need to get better at is really kind of looking at what does the big picture look like. We need to map out what our goals look like. We need to have consistency with our programs, and we need to have additional support in a way of like personnel, resources, and also curriculum. Renee, did I miss anything that you wanted to cover?
No, just again, really, I guess coming here is just also like taking the opportunity to really look at our program. I mean, I've been here for 6 years. When I came in, I was like, okay, I'll come in and look and see what we're doing, and then let's see where we can improve on. COVID hit, I took care of that, right? And so then we got to a point where like, okay, we're starting to recover now from COVID and so forth. Let's continue on the work, and so that's where we're at now. So prior to that's my understanding that we really haven't done any type of a program review for like 12 years, which was the last audit that was done by the state, right? And so that was kind of one of the reasons why the district went from TBE programming to dual language program at the elementary level, right? To kind of fix some of the flaws that we had. So I think, this that we did now currently is probably a great time to see, okay, where has our program gone? Where are the flaws? Where do we need to make fixes? And so I thank the team, I thank all of the teachers that were part of this team to really help us look at our program, because we know, as Frank said, we're doing some good things, but we want to do better. So thank you guys. I know there's two of them here that were part of the team here that really spend their afternoons and working on this and looking what's going to be best for our students.
I had a quick question.
Yes, sir.
The third grade one, I've actually got some feedback on.
Yes.
From teachers that weren't happy.
Yes.
About the change.
Yes.
From Spanish to English.
Yes.
Why not do it in fourth and fifth then? I mean, if it's compelling, I read your reasons for doing it in third. Why not do it in fourth and fifth then? If that's the case, then it isn't gonna be, I mean, I guess I'm wondering, why wait then?
Why wait? Well, one of the things is we wanted to make sure that when we're looking at our data, we want to be as accurate as possible, right? So those students, fourth and fifth grade, have already transitioned from 1 or 2 years already.
Right.
So we don't know exactly, how that's gonna play out, right? So, and then the other thing is, for that transition, is you have heard from some of these teachers from third grade who have said, well, it's gonna be very difficult, right? We're switching, we're making that switch, but we wanna create as least amount of problems for least amount of teachers. So we figured if we do it 1 year at a time, it's going to create less problems for our staff, as well as then, we want to try to do what's best for our kids. Now, we know if we bring more problems, more anxiety, for example, for our teachers, right, that effect then can come down onto our students. So we're trying to minimize that as much as possible. So we figured third grade, we'll start out at third grade and then work our way up to kind of alleviate a little some of that struggle.
I guess the other thing I look at is when you look at the scores for those kids, third, fourth, and fifth grade, and you see some issues, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
How does that compare with the purely monolingual kids in third, fourth, and fifth grade in those same buildings?
So I couldn't answer that question because I don't really have gone specifically comparing one group of kids to another. So I don't really have an answer for you there. I've just been looking at our students where they have been with their levels.
Well, and we do know that there's ongoing opportunity gaps between the performance of our EL students in those areas that are in that dual language program and our monolingual students who are accessing those services, or is that an inaccurate statement?
So no, we've seen the decline, right?
Yep.
The students that are in the program, whether they're bilingual or mono.
Yep.
But compared to our students who are just in all monolingual, I haven't really done a comparison to that.
See, that's the only thing I was wondering is if you see a decrease as those kids go up and you're attributing it, I'm guessing, tell me if I'm wrong, attributing it at least partially to being taught in Spanish instead of English. So I was wondering if those kids that are in purely monolingual, are they seeing decreases too, or that may show it may be something else besides that anyway.
Yeah, no, I haven't really looked at that compared to that. From what we've been seeing, it's just basically been the language, right? The change of language, the shift of language, the shift of vocabulary, and so forth. That's kind of where we've been attributing that. From what I do know and from what I've seen in our district, especially when we look at some of our district data altogether, if you look at 3, 4, 5, a lot of our scores, especially in math, we show growth, right? And at our 3, 4, 5, we see the decrease first, right? And then they slowly start making that growth. And then, again, once they get to 6th grade, we see that decline again. So that's kind of what I have been in looking at and saying, okay, that assumption there is that it's due to that the switch of language instruction.
Well, you look at, it's not, but you look at the IAR scores, third grade's pretty low, all low, totality.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the next grade level up and not MAP, but IAR.
Yeah.
Look at seventh grade loses a little, but not significantly a lot compared to where third grade was for the last 15 years in Belvedere.
And I think that that's fair to make sure that we're comparing those pieces as well. I think
Yeah.
that's good
That's the
feedback.
reason why we're starting with a cohort to follow through consistently with that
Yep.
data with third grade, the fifth grade with a slow roll up with that, because we're really gonna, that's part of what the committee wants to do too, is really look at that third grade now with the switch. What does the rate of growth looks like that we can actually establish the benchmarks based off of that grade level then? So it's not taking like that whole grade, like a fifth grader who did it next year for 1 year's worth of data. We're really using that third grade cohort to kind of follow them through, to kind of get a better gauge of what data looks like over the 3-year term instead of just a 1 or a 2-year term.
I guess my only concern is if it's really good for third grade, we're taking a risk on fourth and fifth grade, not getting what you guys would think is as good a quality as they could have if we just switched all three.
Well, I think that was part of the thing too, is where the committee had really kind of gone to. It's like we had it looking at as a first through fifth grade, all math, to a point where let's look at third through fifth, and then we had some pushback when they went back to talk to their different teams in the school about doing that. So the part then was to look at third grade, and then because the data was what schools wanted to see, it's like, well, let's take the cohort model then and follow that through to show those other teachers who were fourth and fifth grade teachers who are giving more of the pushback to kind of show that. Not to say there were some third too,
There were
of
some
course,
third.
but I'm just saying that was part of the rationale of the committee in the end, was to do something with that part.
Yeah, originally the committee had looked at changing all 3, 4, 5. They went back to their buildings, and then once they got feedback, they came back. And that's when we decided as a committee then to just focus on one grade level at a time. Did I forget anything?
So I just want to add that it was no surprise, like I have heard the comments, like some teachers, some third grade teachers, that they said, oh, this was a big surprise. It was not. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. We've been looking at the data, that there's been talk. So it was no surprise for anyone that it was coming. And so to your question, I mean, we discuss all the options. We do 3, 4, 5. So think about it. The kid will start Spanish in third grade, so the fourth and fifth graders that we have received one year in Spanish, and then switch to English the next year. It's not fair. It's not fair for the kids just to have given them only 1 year or 2 years in Spanish and say, sorry, now you want to teach, now you want to learn in English. So we looked at all these options and we chose what was best for EL students and also for the two-way students. So we took into consideration, because that was the other thing that I heard, that it will affect the EL students, the Spanish speakers, and we took that into consideration. We really, we talked about it, we wanted to represent everybody, so I think it was fair. This was the best practice for all the dual language kids in the district.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Upcoming contracts, renewals, and reports are provided for your reference. Any questions for Dr. Shug in relation to any of those? All right, at this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Dr. Shug for administrative reports.
And we will do a very, very, very quick superintendent comments. Every month I'm like, should I really put this together? This is gonna be a long meeting. So I'm trying always to make it short for you, but I could not let the month go by without recognizing our historic state line quiz bowl competition between North and BHS. Other than Auburn, the only repeat contestants. It was the first year that it was a all Belvedere battle, and really a proud moment. These kids were exceptional. BHS took the day, but Belvedere won. It was just really a great day. So we really appreciate the kids and the coaches and everybody who made that possible.
I will say it was nice to watch my former student be the moderator.
Oh, nice. Very nice. All right.
And just to
Yes.
back up on this historical moment, right?
Yes.
We've got a lot to be proud of here for our high school, our students.
Yes.
I mean, you take that and spread it around and share it with other districts like I have, that our students, BHS and W North High School, we're competing against each other for the championship for the state land quiz bowl. So it's much, great stuff that we can truly be proud of and really share that information with other folks in the community. So, yeah.
It was a shining, shining day for Belvedere. We have had so many things happening. I just characterized it as all the good stuff. Here at the end of the year, we really have all the good stuff happening. We got all our retirements and our end of the year festivities, but our kids are also really participating in capstone projects, passion projects, field days, just everything in between. It was an exceptional end of the year. I don't know if you guys remember the end of last year. There was some stamina taxing. We were tired. It was our first sort of return to normal year after COVID, and people were tired, kids were tired, staff was tired. This year we were still tired, but there was definitely a brand new energy. We saw way less behavioral infractions, way fewer concerns, and lots of great celebrations. For some schools, the first field day that they had back, schools were doing their first field trips again this year. It was a great end of the year, and again, a lot to really be proud of. And unbelievably, summer is here. So we have dismissed classes for a very brief period of time because we just started summer school this week. And it was a successful first day of summer school
Very well.
at our elementary and at high school. Anything you want to add to that, Dr. Johnson?
No, it just went very well. It was a great first day.
Fantastic, and thank you, Dr. Johnson, for everything you do to make that happen. New student registration is taking place June 26th, and returning students will have registration opening on July 10th. So before we've even barely thought about summer, it is time to think about next year. And as you're thinking about next year, we're looking for substitute teachers. So there are job fairs coming up across the district here in July and in August, September. Dr. Ady, anything you want to say about that?
No, we're just super excited. As I noticed kind of in our update too, we're definitely in a much better place than we were a year ago, and seem to be trending up. And just I constantly connect with surrounding districts to kind of see where we sit with them, and we're kicking everybody's beeps.
It's not bad to win, huh? Is that what you're saying?
It's not
a race,
bad.
but it's not bad to win when you. That's fair.
Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. So those are the very quick highlights for this month. I'm going to have us click into our presentation for strategic plan updates, and I'm going to go through these very quickly as well. In June, Goal 1, anything you want to highlight there for us, Dr. Carson?
No, nothing in particular, Dr. Shuck.
All right, I'm going to give us a quick end of the year summary too. So I'm really going to fly through these slides, but important to note that we just heard from our EL dual language evaluation team, and also on here, our high school schedule piece has been executed as of this evening. We will go ahead and click on to Goal 2 updates. And anything you would highlight here, Dr. Johnson?
There's a lot of wonderful professional development done in the summer, and it really came directly from the feedback of our staff in terms of selection of what they wanted and the topics they wanted. So this is going to be a really great summer.
Yay. And I attributed high school schedule study to Goal 1, but it's Goal 2. And again, thank you for your support board for that and being able to execute that. Goal 3 updates I will talk about in our overall end of the year look. Goal 4 updates, Dr. Ady.
Just a few other things that we're really proud of. 28 of our subs will end up receiving a bonus for working at least 75 days. And a lot of those teachers are way over 75 days. There's another 13 that have worked at least 50 days. So that's been awesome. We do new staff interviews, or at least offer new staff interviews twice a year, once in the spring, once in the fall. And we also have a question on there about their satisfaction rate with their onboarding. And I don't know how many people we interviewed altogether, but 40, 50 people. And the overall average onboarding satisfaction rate was 9.02, which we thought was really, really good. We know we can improve, and we're constantly looking for ways to improve that process. And then overall average job satisfaction rate for new employees was a 9.54. So feel really good about that. Of course, not all the feedback is like super positive all the time, but we let them know that it's anonymous, but we do take their feedback very serious, and it's a way for us to take that feedback and to keep improving everything that we do. So really happy about that.
Thank you, Dr. Ady. And Mrs. Armstrong, anything on goal 5 you'd like to highlight?
Well, we are obviously doing a lot of work on facilities master planning and getting more information so we know where we are as a district, and I think that is a positive step in the right direction. We implemented both new work order systems, and our tech refresh plan is complete. We're starting to replace some of our technology. One of those core changes was the Cisco Edge and routing switches for the district have all been replaced and updated to Meraki switches, which increases our capacity. We are also increasing our bandwidth with our fiber connections, which will give us greater connectivity, more stable platform, which is fantastic for the operational component. I personally like to highlight that I am a year ahead of schedule of getting you financial reports that are more user-friendly, which was not a goal I was set to meet till next year, so I'm very happy about that. But I think we are doing a tremendous amount of work on the safety reunification programs, all of the security side. So on the operational component of Goal 5, I think we have just done a lot of work, but there is still a lot more that will be coming over the next year or so.
And yeah, so if you didn't think we were busy, go ahead and click into our strategic plan end of the year update, and we're going to give you a really, really quick recap, not only of what we've done as we've gone through month by month and just tried to highlight some of the big lifts that have been happening. We also sort of captured that for our staff and for our families at the end of the year as well. Ms. Hadley, do you want to click into that PDF that's also in that document there? Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. And Ms. Hadley designed this PDF, so I want to make sure to give her a shout out as well. And goal 1, Dr. Carson.
Yeah, so just want to celebrate that we had, this is our first year expanded early childhood, and I think Dr. Bauman's over there, so kudos to her and the team for expanding our capacity to serve almost 400 kids this year. This week we have, so as we talked about staff participating in PD, we have teachers from our high schools participating in PD around SIOP, which is language acquisition training, to give them skills and tools to use. And you just heard the program review from Bilingual Ed, so those are 3 of our big milestones for this year.
And goal 2?
Yeah, we were able to track our interventions in Panorama platform for attendance, behavior, reading, and math. And our high school obviously has been working really hard on their student success intervention, and also just really an increase in some of those work-based learning opportunities. That's some of the work that Mr. Fry has been doing for our students that include internships.
All right, and for goal 3, for our Family and Community Partnerships team, last month the board approved our Family and Community Partnerships action plan that will involve a number of key action steps, including really connecting with alumni, really connecting with our community partners and making a directory to really make that information accessible and build our support in the community. And we are also going to be developing a marketing plan, so we are excited about the work to come there. And goal 4.
again, you know, we still have a long way to go, but a lot better off than we were last year. And our fill rate actually was 71%. It was, if we round up, we were like 70.69, so it was 71%.
Who's counting?
Believe me, I'm counting.
Approximately 70.6.
Everyone.
So it was actually 7% over last year's sub fill rate too. I know Frank and Barb and others did a lot of work with the professional development. They did the conference style SIP day where peers teach other peers, and they really seem to like that a lot. And I believe that's going to be a continued practice in the future too, for at least one of the SIP days every year.
All right, and goal 5, Mrs. Armstrong.
Well, I think I jumped ahead because I think I did this celebration in my last comment.
That's
So
all right.
I'm gonna leave that there. I got ahead of myself to celebrate my great things that the team's been doing.
But I mean, really, I think as we are moving through the year, we don't recognize all of the, really heavy lifting that's been happening across the district due to so many invested individuals, students, staff, families, all of these action teams, including all of these stakeholder groups. Lots of fantastic work done, lots of celebrations. Any questions on the strategic plan end of the year summary or monthly update? It seems that we might need to further discuss the 2024-2025 board meeting dates. We have them listed. I know there is that change there, and I know Mr. Zickert, that maybe is not going to work for you. Do we want to just leave this on for next month, or do we want to just adopt these as they are? Do we have any thoughts
Did I
about
miss
that?
something?
We have the 2024-2025
Right.
board meeting dates are listed there.
Right.
And we added a meeting the first Monday of the month to help us when we are struggling a little bit to get those expulsion hearings on the calendar. And just wanted to clarify that is an add, is a tentative special meeting for the first Monday of the month, and then our traditional meetings the third Monday of the month.
And I'm sorry, did I miss you saying it didn't work for you?
Didn't work for me, so you're dealing with a pool of 5 then, which the 5 want to do all of them. Carl and I will be fine not doing any of them.
But then my question
It's
is,
fine.
we could also use them if we determine so at the next special board meeting, that it could be used if we don't have an expulsion for like committee of the whole work, if
Yep.
we deemed, which
Yep.
I feel like then
Yep.
the whole board needs to be there, so
Yep.
if we need to revise the dates, but does everybody feel good with the concept? I feel like we've talked about this quite a few different times.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I suppose we're gonna continue to discuss it. Mondays is hard for me because it's an in-office day. So I just, I think at least 2 or 3 times this year it was, I made it to board meetings, but that's when boarding meetings are. One a month, I just kind of say, look, I'm leaving at 4:20 people. But, if it came down to literally having 2 every month, I do what I can.
We can pick a different day of the week.
That's what I'm
like
saying,
Monday's
right, but I mean
not-
the concept, so then
Yeah.
Pam's not having to chase us for scheduling for a special board meeting or
Yeah.
expulsion, right? Just that we had set dates.
If it was
and
a
then we
different
don't have to
day,
go
but not
through
like,
that.
for me, a Wednesday, Thursday would be better. Personally, for that, like one a month is fine. I've just let my whole team know, look,
All right, so
the third
let's just
Monday I
circle
leave
back.
it,
So we will circle back with the second one, and we can look at what day of the week perhaps is best for the board, and still plan to have them every other week essentially. Yep. Okay, that sounds good. Thank you for that feedback. And we do have the financial updates. Mrs. Armstrong, do you wanna walk us through those financial updates?
So May is of course a month where we're starting to gear up for that end of the year. So we're starting to see some more of those expenses come in. June is going to be your big month that you're going to see all of our end of year. We're chasing down invoices, we're closing out POs that haven't been fully received, contacting vendors, are you going to send it, are you not? And so you're gonna see a lot of activity happening in May and June. You're also, unfortunately, we will do the grant claims at the end of the quarter, which is June 30, so those revenues will come in July. However, on your grants reports that we put in with your financials every month, you'll see that what we're gonna be claiming in on those grants. So we are trending very well where we would anticipate when you look at the year over year. Again, as I have said each month, when you're looking at that first page of the federal revenues, that seems really high this year compared to previous years. That's your ESSER funding, that's what's coming through, and when we closed out ESSER 2, we closed that out in September, October of this fiscal year. So you're seeing that end final cap out of ESSER 2, and you're seeing us try to maximize those dollars that we're spending for the end of ESSER 3 that's coming up again in September of this year. So you'll see some happening in June, but you're gonna see that big influx in next fiscal year for ESSER 3, because the boiler projects are going on that are primarily funded out of our ESSER 3. So you would anticipate to see those final costs come out of next year's report. So you'll see some variances there. On your expenditures, coming up to the last month of the year, it's predictable to see that we've spent 92.2% of our budget on our salaries and benefits of where we are. So that's a good trend that we're seeing. We're following what we expected. Our purchase services is down. If you remember, I talked about that a little bit last month, about getting our Organic Life and our first student invoices coming in. And our supplies, materials, we are not spending quite as much as we had anticipated that we'd be spending. So that is where we're gonna probably see some return at the end of the year as we try to get things budgeted out. This may be the area where we have some unspent dollars that would go into our fund balance that we'll continue to plan for those. I think it is key to point out that with the way that we're doing the budgeting now in the Skyward software, the meetings I'm having with departments and buildings, is that we are really starting to hone in on how they budget and where they're putting their budget dollars. So we're gonna continue to refine that and be able to give those projections that Board Member Zickert's asking about, and that all the board wants to see, is looking at those 5-year forecasts and looking at how we have back data that is now aligned with where we're budgeting, where we're spending, and we can pull that data together to give us true looks of how we're doing our budget, and really being intentional on where we're allocating that, so we can do some of these projects that we know are coming down the pipeway, and maybe not having to go into fund balance or not having to go out to debt issuances. That's obviously can't do $110 million based on what we have here, but I think that having useful data that is reliable and that we can see those trends is going to put us in a position where I feel confident giving you those projections moving out. And I do anticipate at the course of next year, as I finalize next year's budgets, to bring to you those assumptions and how we're moving forward. I want to be able to provide you also that 3 to 5 year forecast of what we're looking at going forward. There is a lot in the air with the ESSER funding going, and what has the district fully been paying and taking into consideration with ESSER, and what is coming down the pipeway, which is part of when we made those decisions about ESSER, continuing some of those for 1-year agreements, and let's see where we are, is I think that's giving us some opportunity to see how this really shakes out for us. I still continue to look at it, and I assure you, I am looking at that big picture, and Dr. Shug and I are talking about it quite a bit, about what is happening with all the asks and things that are coming on. And I would love to have that crystal ball to say, yep, this is what's coming down the road 10 weeks or 5 months later. But I think some of this data is what's gonna give us that ability to start trending that data.
That's why I thought May was always a good month to look, because I'm assuming we already got our first draw on the property taxes, which is a pretty
You get
big.
that the last day of May.
Yeah, that's a pretty big chunk.
Yes, it is. And so those will be coming in, you'll start seeing that, that's also gonna bump up our local revenue. So as you start looking at that very first page and seeing our local revenue is only at 85.6%, as Mr. Zicker said, yep, we got a $22 million payment of our first installment of Boone County property taxes. That again, as I try to reiterate, we get those property taxes in a very short 3 to 4 month period, and that's what sustains us for the rest of the year. We don't have another steady flux of it. So that gets invested, earning that interest on that money, and really advocating it to kind of portion it out. It's like getting your whole salary at one chunk, and you better budget and plan how you're gonna spend it for those coming months. So, we look really flush with cash at that May and June timeframe. Go into August, you're feeling good. September, you're good, and then you start drawing on that and it's going down. So, that's a big concept with government finance that you have to think about, is you get your money here, and it's how you spend it the rest of the year that plays into effect.
So, thank you very much, Joanne. And that brings us to the end of admin reports.
Anybody have any further questions for Dr. Shedd? Okay. At this time, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second. Member Herrera made a motion, and Member Mayville seconded the motion to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 9:10.